Hi, Mariah. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
How are you tonight, Nathan?
Here.
Good.
It's Monday night, so
Cool.
tired as everybody else is, I assume.
Oh, yeah. I was at the Renaissance Center about 20 minutes ago, so obviously I haven't even sort of adjusted to the new place I'm sitting in right now.
Yeah, it looks like you didn't even manage to get your jacket off yet.
No, not at all. So, Judd, you're here early.
Yep, driving right now.
Okay, thanks for being here. I appreciate that. Hi, Thomas. How are you? Back on
Good,
the
how you
school,
doing?
back on the school bus, I see.
Yeah, I couldn't quite make it to the school.
No problem. Hey, Mateo, how are you? So, let's see. I've made my hotel reservation. So I'm driving to Cincinnati, and I'm looking forward to that trip. If, let's see, Mariah and Thomas, if you're not going to go, let me know, because I'll cancel it. But I just saw a thumbs up from Mariah. That's 2, right? Mateo, are you going? Nathaniel? Okay, Thomas is going. That's 3.
I have a +1 mark, remember.
All right, so you're bringing a friend. So we have enough. We have a quorum. And are you staying down there, or are you driving in that morning? What are you doing?
I'm going to get a room.
Okay. Have you done that yet?
No, I was going to tonight.
Okay, good.
That might probably not a good idea. But...
Yeah. Okay, good. So, and Anna, did I understand that you will not be going on this field trip this weekend?
Yeah, I won't be able to.
That's okay. I just want to make sure. So we have enough going, but I just wanted to get. So I'm going to see. Nathaniel, did you say you were going?
I can go, yeah.
Good. So Thomas, Nathaniel, Mateo +1, Mariah 5, and Mark. So that's a great trip. I think even in the first years, we might have only got 4 or 5. So we're close to 6, and I'm pleased about that. And so I'll see you at 9 a.m. on Saturday morning. We'll have like a brunch at Skyline Chili, and then the first building that we'll see, we'll drive over to the Frank Gehry building. We'll park there and walk around it, and then we'll drive just up the hill to a good parking place that will give us access to the whole campus, and the tour will start in the School of Architecture building, the Design Art Architecture building, the DAAP includes planning, Design Architecture Art and Planning building by Peter Eisenman, and I'll get you hopelessly lost in that facility, and then we'll start moving on from there. It should take about 3 hours and 10:30, 11:30, 1:30. So we should be on the road by 2 o'clock, unless we drive downtown and see the Hadid building. So I'm really looking forward to that. The weather will be sunny but cool. It'll be really chilly, so make sure you have some layers and bring rain gear just in case, because the weather that I looked at was actually for up here, and I don't really know what it's going to be like down in the valley. So if you guys find of anything out about the weather changing suddenly, let the other people know. I'll pick up the tab for Skyline Chili on Saturday, and then I'll ask you to sort of find your own lunch on the way back. Let's see. Are there any questions about that? Okay. I also have on my calendar for us November 16th, which is a week from Wednesday. That's a second pinup review. That's kind of a big deal. That review is from 5:30 p.m. Eastern time until 9:30, 10 o'clock that evening. I have Lindsay Woods, one of the project managers and one of the project architects in our office, helping us. So you're going to get a different perspective, and you're going to get different kinds of input from someone who is just learning about Detroit, which I think is going to be really interesting for you to sort of try to get your sort of research and your argument, right? Your argument across to this individual. And so she's really excited about this. She's heard me talk a lot about the studio, so she's all good about that. Are there any questions about the benchmark? I'll send out the grade sheets updated to be benchmark 2. And the rubric, the matrix will slightly change. And I will release those the Saturday before the pinup, or the Sunday before the pinup, because the Saturday is our field trip. And so if you're changing your stuff, if you're changing your summary or your write-up, please send that before we leave on the field trip, okay? Please send that on Thursday night so that I can modify it on Friday and hit send on Sunday morning, because I want to give Lindsay enough time to get acclimated. Are there any questions about the grade sheet? Cool. And nothing firm from the school about the final review, but my calendar somehow indicates that the final benchmark is Saturday, December 10th. And so I would continue to hold that date. You're encouraged to be here for it, but if you're living in Chicagoland or in Fairmont, I don't expect that to be the case. We accommodate that distance via online. And even if you're in Howell or Grand Rapids, we accommodate that. Although our folks in Grand Rapids, I would really love to see you drive in for that review. So if you could be here for that review, that would be really ideal for you and for all of us. I also got an email asking me if I wanted to teach next semester. So I know that they're doing a look ahead suddenly, today. I know that they're starting to think about who that faculty is going to be and who's available. I expect that they'll be asking for studio briefs next semester. And I'd like you to think a little bit more about how you would improve this semester's course if I offered it again next semester. I think we left some things on the table last time. The idea of maybe letting someone from Fairmont or someone from, Chicago pick Chicago as their site for their research. And I'd like you to sort of think about the sort of strengths and the opportunities or the cons, if you will, in something like that. And anything else that you can think of. You will be hit up for, I know we're looking way, way ahead to the end of December, but I know you will be hit up for another course evaluation, faculty evaluation. That's kind of the big deal one. That's the final one. So I really need you to participate in that one. We had 7 out of 8 of you participating in the mid-review, which was really, really fantastic. So I appreciate that. And then finally, looking that far ahead, you will be getting some sort of announcement about registering for classes. If you haven't gotten it already, have you gotten it already? So you guys are already on board for registration for the spring semester. So have you done that already then? Good.
I think that's next Monday, right?
Yeah, it opens next Monday.
It opens Monday. And are the courses like faculty to be determined? Or is it just the date to register for classes?
They usually just have everybody sign up for one section. They send out the course briefs. We choose from those, and
yeah,
they pick us from that.
Okay, so we haven't even written the course briefs yet. So they're just trying to find out, how many students they're going to get so that they can figure out how many faculty that they need. All right. Okay. So I'm going to go over some things tonight. Can you all see that? I just wanted to share with you some additional images, right? So these are not necessarily the kind of product that you're doing, right? I mean, I grant. So, Judd, you'll have to come back and look at this online, but I'm not going to lecture about this. I'm not going to go into any detail, but I definitely want to share with you some images just to get the sort of palette a little bit more broad in the vocabulary of what I would call mixed-use housing opportunities, and from the perspective of looking at simple things like how the street is addressed, how the body of the building is addressed, how windows are configured in that skin, and how the top is addressed. Those are like key things. For instance, in this picture, the base is articulated with higher first floor dimensions. That's typical in any mixed use building. And in effect, you're all designing mixed use buildings, whether it's a small building with a little mom and pop neighborhood retail shop on the corner or not. It's still going to have this kind of, DNA. It's still going to have a first floor that's probably taller than most floors above it. It's going to have probably some gesture to the street insofar as increased transparency, increased amounts of glass, increased areas of glass. It's probably going to have some way to acknowledge the pedestrian and protecting them from the sun and from rain vis-a-vis canopies or awnings. And then usually in buildings that are bigger like this particular one, you're going to see an effort to chunk the building into more discrete components so that it fits the grain and texture of the site. So it's not one big ass building, but something that looks as if it's been aggregated, right, or accumulated over time. This is a building, obviously, like in Germany, right, or in Belgium, an historic building with the staggered gable, right? So this is a cleaned up historic building, but look at how the new building insinuates itself between the historic building here on the far left and this other historic building on the right. It does it with a couple of what I would call gaskets or transitions, right? A gasket. So one of those gaskets is this piece here, which looks a lot like this piece here. The other gasket is this larger, taller piece that is actually similar, right, to the middle gasket. So there's two tall, all glass, steel, and masonry volumes that probably have residential. And then there's the gasketed pieces, which are stepped down, that allow the two glass volumes with residential to stand prouder, to be more significant. And then there's the gasket that's stepped back and clad in a different material. Notice how the materials are changing, right? The grain, in some cases, like in the gasket, is horizontal, right? And then in the tall residential, the metal panel is vertical, right? And then of course, the steel marks each of the floors in kind of a Victorian fashion with horizontal brick infill. So there's very few materials composed in strategic, smart ways to make a big thing chunk down into smaller things and to let it step back and come forward in alternating rhythms so as to make the volume of this big building much smaller on the streetscape. Again, the first floor is held to a taller dimension. It's usually glassier, right? More transparent, usually has a canopy. And in this case, it has kind of a forecourt with kind of a trellis and a fence wrapping around it so as to maybe make a a give back space, a community space, or a public park space. So those are things that you are all playing with. Again, we're not necessarily talking about historic buildings of this magnitude and quality. We're not talking about density of this height and this sort of robustness, but the themes of working in contexts, working in simple material choices, and the themes of dealing with mixed-use buildings is still true. This is another view of another mixed-use building, in this case dealing obviously with the curve, dealing with, again, basically three materials: metal panel that slips behind, right? Maybe a drive-it or cement plasterboard, and then a brick building. And notice how the brick is 3 stories, where the first floor has a taller first floor dimension. So from the street, this appears as a 3-story building with these concrete masonry unit pop-ups here, here, and here, and then as well here. And then a larger piece in metal that's divided into panels, where all of the windows are basically more or less the same, right? In some cases they're punched, in some cases they're sliding, and in cases of the masonry, they're almost always punched. So there's kind of a logic, kind of a clarity to how all of these buildings are operating. This is kind of an interesting thing. This is kind of sided in a fiberboard. It has a very dark palette. It frames out the windows so that normal, conventional double-hung windows are given a contrasting white frame, and they push out from the normal skin, the normative skin. And notice how the siding is also varying in dimensions, right? So where there's bands of windows, it has like a 4-inch exposure. And then where it goes between floors or at the floor line, it jumps to like maybe an 8-inch dimension. Little subtle things like that can give a building some measure of sort of richness and detail that it might not normally have if you just treated it all, you know, uniformly. The base in this building is all concrete, but then you can see how the corner is notched away, it's mortised away, so that it has a very small but transparent entry, and the ceiling of that entry extends out into a wood soffitted canopy that's all sort of part of the sign band, right, for this residential building. I'll zoom in on this one. This is probably in Chicago. Again, 5-story buildings, a simple building, but in this case, what's interesting is that in that gasket between the two sort of glass volumes, which are stacked residential floors, there's something to notice here. There's actually a fold line right here. So this is maybe community space, or maybe these are you know, lobbies and stair lobbies and things like that. You might think of it as a stair lobby because of the front door down below, but that element is actually given kind of a, I guess it would be a contrapuntal move, right? It projects out, it flexes a little bit of muscle on the street against these two glass volumes. And notice how the top floor, right, pops up as almost as if it's a dormer. It tops out at 1.5 stories to give those top floor units a lot more presence and a lot more sort of vertical dimension. And I think those are some moves that you can make even in like a 2- and 3-story building. Again, these are much larger buildings, and they'll be helpful for you if you think of them as smaller things, and if you think of them in your work in the next semester. But I think what's interesting in the case of this one is how the building is sort of one normal chassis on this street, and then extends up with a slight bend, a slight inflection with a fold line right at this floor line. And as it steps back, right, you can see the impact of that step back in these windows with the shadow line, and then you can see the impact of what balconies have on this all metal skin. Notice how the first floor is almost a double height retail floor with butt joint glazing. And then in the joint between these buildings, which it looks like it actually spans completely over a street, The units continue, and you see that sort of profile, that vent profile, operate at a slightly lower scale here. This is a lovely building too. So this is a multi-story building. It's all one large brick volume, right, with a grand first floor of retail. And then you see how the brick terminates at the top with a simple stone cornice that projects out just past the normal brick skin. And then the top floor is terraced back. It's stepped back maybe, 10 feet, right? Like 10 feet right here. And it's all clad in metal to give the presence of this large building on the street a little bit more of a graspable dimension. It's not a 7-story building on the street. It's a 6-story building, but the 7th floor, again, is held back. I also appreciate how, if you look at the skin, right, the windows are not all lined up. There is a basic attitude about the load of masonry transferring all the way down in a normal, conventional fashion, right? This is not a brick building that would give Dan Farrow teaching your structures class a migraine, right? There is resolution in the brick skin, but that doesn't mean, right, that all of the windows have to line up jam to jam. There just has to be a route for the loads of the masonry on the 6th floor to transfer to the 5th, to transfer to the 4th and 3rd and 2nd as you move down. So there's some sort of, I don't want to call it graphical, but I think this strategy to provide some richness and nuance in the facade in such a way that the skin is this interesting texture on the street, and yet at the same time it's all set within, I think, a very conventional brick volume. Even this little 4-story building on the corner off to the right is not a bad effort. It's got the same thing that our buildings will have: 3 floors, 4 floors, a nice proud base, and simple punched openings for the 2nd floor. I'm going to skip over this and this, although let's go back to that. It's kind of interesting, talking about staggering the loads as we come down, right? So here's a section drawing that's showing, right, different kinds of residential units, right, with spanner spaces, right, that allow the volume of the building to be preserved for not only residential units, but for residents and the community spaces that they might desire, not only at the 2nd floor, but at the 5th floor. And the building steps back from the street, so that from the street, this building only reads as like a 6-story building because the top floor is held back. Oh, I love this building. This is, again, a very simple strategy, a very simple brick volume, sitting not concentrically on the base, right? It's cantilevered out over the sidewalk, over this retail promenade. You see that? You see the soffit with the downlights in it? So that's like a 6 or an 8-foot, maybe 10-foot cantilever that maybe finds some resolution back here. Or maybe, because I don't know this building that well, maybe this skin down here is in the same plane as the brick skin above, or maybe just like a 1-foot, 18-inch offset, but then it splays, right? It splays to a greater dimension, therefore to a greater cantilever as we move out towards the street, so that the sidewalk is tapering just as the soffit above it is tapering. This move might have to do with a geometry in the site that we can't, looking at this photograph, see, but these are the moves that you can make, allowing the ground floor to relate to things like walkways and parking lots, but the upper floors can project out over, right, those ground floor conditions to provide functional shading and rain protection, and at the same time provide you the sort of volume and square footage for residential space in the volumes above it. So a very subtle move, right? Ground floor is smaller than the top floors. A simple rotation of the larger mass over the smaller mass, and yet all in just a 4-story building where that ground floor, again, has a sort of taller dimension. And even if it isn't exactly taller than everything else above it, it's given a lot more glass. And look, again, we talked a lot about the structural resolution. This building maybe has a little bit more issue with that because each of these windows are alternating, right? The second floor and the fourth floor have windows that line up, but the third floor is an offset condition. And it's all resolved in this sort of symmetrical and asymmetrical facade. I also appreciate how the window groupings have operable windows at the base, right? And then they have fixed windows under a shade or a sunscreen. And then they have a transom window with a wood opaque transom above it that's probably picking up the floor construction for the floor above, right? And then you see that same wood, that same sort of found wood aesthetic operating in the spandrels on the first floor. Then the stair tower is this simple, understated stair tower / elevator is this simple, understated charcoal metal panel or maybe fiber cement paneled volume that is that creates, again, that asymmetrical composition. Clever little building, very subtle, but I think, you know, in the same vein of everything we've been talking about tonight. A building that we've been inspired by in our own work, a much more transparent strategy where the floor lines are given the horizontal sort of roll of the datum, and then the curtain wall is, quite honestly, almost entirely transparent, except for some conditions of opaque glass or translucent glass. But again, I think the important thing here is the idea of stepping the building back as it ascends vertically, the idea of balconies not necessarily being everywhere. And notice how these balconies are actually splayed away from the skin, so that, like on this top balcony here, this end cap is smaller than this end cap. So the balcony actually angles away from the building to give you a graduated footprint for the balcony. And maybe that's because it's taking one small unit and joining it to a much larger unit in terms of the role of the balcony. And again, the first floor can be, in a way, you know, ignorant, right, of the stuff that's happening above it. It can enjoy its own geometry. It can enjoy its own role of transparency, openness, and therefore connectivity to the site. You know, I talk a lot about, and you saw it in the Brush Park stuff, you saw it in my lectures, you can imagine that we talk a lot about it at the office. Yeah, you're all dealing with properties, with property lines, and your buildings fit within those. But the best projects are the ones that push up against the property line and go past it, that actually control the conversation in terms of what can happen on the ground plane, what can happen on the sidewalk, what can happen when the retail spaces open up, the way this barista coffee shop is described, with this sort of hinging up and down door that creates a sort of a wonderful moment of theater every morning and every evening when it opens and closes respectively, and how that sort of connects us to the sidewalk, and how the sidewalk and life on the sidewalk can engage with that retail tenant. The same building again up close. Again, terracing back at the upper levels to allow the building to have a little bit more, you know, I'd say modesty, although this is a pretty hefty building. And I think this is actually clumsy in the way that it's rendered. I think, you know, the brick is a bit peculiar, and also this has kind of the vibe of an office building. But I think it begins to show you that within the sort of idea of repetition, you can create difference and distinction. Notice, for instance, how the spandrels in the middle part have this sort of bronze color, and then the spandrels everywhere else have the masonry lintel or masonry spandrel. These are sort of moves that you can make to reduce the heft of anything you're doing into something that's maybe a little bit smaller, a little bit more graspable. Here's that same drawing that we saw earlier. This is the elevation. Maybe this is that one in Amsterdam or Belgium. And I think you can begin to see the gaskets a little bit more clearly. Well, you see them a little bit more differently. Right now you're seeing them frontally, and you're probably seeing everything as sort of one height. Obviously, it's not quite the same height, but the elements that we're proudest here, right here, and right here are actually in the same height as the gasket, which was this piece and this piece. And then this gasket's a little taller, maybe because it's got elevators and stairs in it. But you can see how you can break down a facade into sort of constituent elements to make something that's much larger seem to fit the context in a little bit more deliberate fashion. Doesn't all have to be brick. Doesn't all have to be bronze. Notice how this building is a series of very simple, punched, large, double-hung windows in a much larger orange window frame. I suspect that the mechanical units are in the sill of each of these windows. And the windows, or no, that's actually like a grill, rather. So this is like a balcony. So these windows open up and you can probably step out into that balcony. And notice how the jambs, right, and the frame of these windows are this sort of burnt orange color. And it steps back at the top with these little moves that show or reveal the rooftop. Also notice that this is just sort of a simple, maybe corrugated metal sided building. And then as we move down the street, the building starts to step down to meet some of the context here. And the figure ground reverses, right? As it turns the corner, the gray field color becomes the field color for the windows, and the orange color for the windows on the front and side facade become the field color for the building. So I love this idea that with just like two different colors, right, the gray and the orange, you create a really straightforward palette for a very large building. I mean, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, plus the roof. This is like an 8-story building. And yet it has the kind of character of the windows of the buildings next door, right? It doesn't necessarily line up exactly with it, but it is its own building, and it sits fairly proudly on the street. And I also really appreciate the simplicity of this overhanging canopy. Obviously, as it takes on rain, it spills it out to the curb line, so the sidewalk stays dry and protects the passersby and the shoppers as they come into the building. Very, very sophisticated building because it's so simple. The palettes don't have to be vividly orange or vividly wild. The color of white can be, your friend. So here's a building, again, that elevates the first floor into something very, very tall. But then you notice how at the gasket of glass here is kind of maybe the common areas. You can see like a service door down here. But the facade is also this sort of pattern of spandrels that create large window groupings with small windows in them. So here's a large window grouping with 2 small windows. And then the same windows are given a different frame as you move your way and your eye down the facade. So these are ways of taking a large, tall building and breaking it into smaller components. We talked about material sensibility, talked a little bit about the orange and gray. So here that reciprocal action is starting to happen like you saw in that previous building here. So we have a preponderance of gray with a small amount of white, and it starts to move towards more white as you look left. and then you have very little white with a lot of gray, and maybe a color, a contrasting note of blue starts to operate. So the facade can actually tell a story in terms of color theming as you move down the length of the property. It's hard to do in a small site. It's hard to do in small buildings. So I'm not necessarily recommending this on your projects, but these are tools of the design trade. I don't know that I can get you that building much larger than that. Sorry about that. Taking a building and again chunking it, right? Reducing it so that it's a series of things, right? A 4-story thing with a tall 5th floor that lines up with some sort of canopy that marks a balcony condition, and then the corner, which is often the move for most architects to do something taller and prouder, is actually reduced by a floor to create an outdoor space that's open to the sky at the corner. So the corner is actually much larger, and yet at the same time, it's all part of this one building, which I appreciate. We saw in the work of Loha, you know, the idea of the ground floor being a full footprint kind of condition. But as you move up, the building starts to sculpt. It starts to react, right, to the energies and the forces or the view sheds of the context. This building is in scale with everything in North End. This may be longer. It may be wider than some of the pieces that you're looking at in North End, but this is right in your wheelhouse. 3 stories, 2 stories, 4 stories. Notice how the 4-story only happens in a couple of conditions, right? And notice how the 4-story is always next to like 3-story things, or it's next to a roofscape like here on this corner. Notice how the corner is all glass and it opens up to not only the street, but a large sidewalk area in the front. So the idea of letting the roof play a role in the building form, letting the building form relate to the context by, you know, mortising the mass so that there's volumes that stick up and volumes that recede, is a way of helping maybe comment on the rhythm and the texture of the North End neighborhood. This building is very, very simple. 3 materials, one of which I'm not even sure what it is, kind of a green, spongy egg crate facade. Maybe it's all wood in that sort of chocolate gray. Very simple windows, very simply framed. Maybe not enough windows for my money, but then that is in contrast, right, to that ground floor of retail, which is certainly all glass. Bigger buildings tend to have a lot more sort of detail, right? We just saw one a moment ago that was pretty, you know, rudimentary, highly flexible and highly active in its massing and very simple in its language of materials. But sometimes in these bigger buildings that you'll get, you know, in larger urban settings, which are literally just down the street from North End, you have to start to look at ways of making the big things small. And you do that by starting to acknowledge the flexibility of the material by turning it or rotating it or pushing it in or pulling it out to create richness and detail in the skin. And so you pick that up here. Look at these 2 conditions of double height soldier course, right? Soldier course in red with 1 brick pushed out to create a ledge, right? And 2 soldier courses pushed in from the red, right? So you get 2 and 2. You get 4 stacked soldier courses with a frame at the top. And then 1 floor up, that same idea happens again in order to mark the floor. And then over here, that same spandrel, because these are all in line, becomes a much longer thing and a much more rich thing because it's got this big cavity carved out of the facade, right? Notice how the brick is a normal running bond pattern in the building with framed metal openings for these lovely windows. But then the brick on the ground floor, right, is turned into a soldier course in a stacked bond, or maybe it's a running bond. I'm not sure. It's probably a stacked bond, but it is done in such a way to emphasize, right, the verticality of the first floor, and even the windows on the first floor have that same framing. But notice how 3 punched windows above, right, line up with one large window below. Again, trying to create some order and sort of geometric sort of rigor within the sort of study of the facades. Turn the corner and you can begin to see how that plays out. Notice how not all of the windows have that frame. So like right at the corner, it drops out. The balconies drop out. So these are like games that you can play. You don't have to treat each thing the same way. I tend to think that you'll find more variety and richness, as you're seeing in this example, on much larger buildings. You have to decide what's right for your situation as a designer and what's right for this particular building. Obviously, a lot of other things like schedule and materials and budget and those sorts of things drive the conversation on detail. But it's important for you to understand what the potential is for these materials. And again, it's just brick, it's just metal, and it's just glass. I love how rich this architecture can get. I love the potential for architecture to be this stimulating and rich with such a ridiculously small palette. Yep, you would guess, right? Another building that we fancy. This is kind of trying to pick up on, you know, the warehouse aesthetic of the windows, much larger curtain wall windows inside of their own frame, and then each of those large window elements is broken into smaller panes to be reminiscent of, you know, say an Albert Kahn factory or a Dudok factory in the Netherlands or something like that. But notice the roofscape, right? The roofscape is a much more active volume. This is something you can do on larger buildings. Courtyards. We've talked a little bit about courtyards in your own work. The public space, I think, is a very important notion. The ground plane is as much a program as a bedroom and a bathroom in these projects. And notice how the courtyard has its own language. I think I shared this one with you a while ago, but the skins that face the courtyard are varied, right? They have different materials, but the courtyard is definitely a pleasant space, and it's something that you should take into account. Yep, you would expect this out of sort of any office, someone studying a corner building, a mixed-use building, trying to relate the building to a street elevation, you know, 2 floors on the left, stepping back about 8 feet, 10 feet, and then letting these little like dormers pop up and down, right, to create balcony opportunities, to let those dormers in effect stitch or zip into the sky, and then letting the ground floor retail wrap and become a podium on which the volume of residential for this corner unit sits very proudly. This reminds me of Stephen Hull's Science Museum at Cranbrook, and then letting that streetscape just sort of articulate, just kind of array, right, as it moves down the block. You know, we don't maybe talk about this in our studio. We talk a lot about it at my office. It took me a while to get my office to start talking about this, because a lot of us look at architecture via SketchUp. And, you know, we're always orbiting and rotating around and looking at the whole thing in SketchUp. And I really appreciate how everyone is able to sort of see the resolution of the 3-dimensionality of the building in that software. But here's the deal. You gotta, that's slang, right? You gotta elevate the model. You've got to convert the model into elevations. You have to look at your work frontally. I'm not telling you you need to do elevations, but you need to study your building in elevation. You have to make sure that you're seeing things from the tradition of the building elevation, because that's actually part of the tradition of design. That's how we study figure ground. That's how we study cadence. That's how we study materials and the way they join. That's how we study, of course, proportion, right? So these are very key drawings that every plan commission, every plan board, every zoning board is going to require. I don't require any specific kind of drawing in this class. I want to go over what you're going to draw with you as you move towards these benchmarks. But suffice to say that you heard it tonight, that in order to really fully understand the role these buildings that you're designing have on the street and have in the neighborhood, you really got to study them this way. Again, simple palette, right? You can imagine this as a 2-story, 3-story, or the 4-story that it is. It's actually a 5-story building, again, because the terrace is set back, right? This is kind of a wood facade. The wood is running vertically. The windows are framed and extruded. The frame is extruded to give some sense of shadow and depth to the to each individual opening. All right, we'll go past that. We'll go past that. And then just sort of talking a little bit about, you know, maybe thinking of the ground floor as like everything from like 15 or 20 feet, whatever your floor line is, thinking of everything below that line in any mixed use building that you're doing, maybe in your own project, maybe the corner spaces on your building, letting that be kind of its own thing. It can be quirky, it can be informal, it can be varied like you're seeing here. It doesn't have to be this sort of like lowbrow, but like look at the power of, you know, simple blade signs, simple strung lights, and simple front doors with a little topiary out in front of it. It's actually a very attractive detail, and it allows for the pedestrian to feel comfortable enough to walk inside. By contrast, right, we've seen these sort of moves earlier today, right, where you step back the building but then allow the balconies to project out to the normative skin or skin line or street wall of the building. So these are kind of interesting sort of compositions in terms of the silhouette. Again, the windows aren't necessarily lining up. Notice the power of the joints and the the vertical joints and the horizontal joints in this metal skin, and then the power of asymmetry, really an important condition. This maybe is a residential building with some maybe pronounced retail or hospitality component in it. Maybe it's not exactly for you, but if you're doing like a mixed-use building with some sort of commercial space in it, community space in it, these are ways to emphasize that condition, to make that space, to make that program more integral to the context that frames this. Now then, you know, no class would be complete without sort of the discussion of the wonky, right? And letting the architecture be highly sort of provocative or suggestive. In contradistinction to architecture that looks like something Mateo's office would do, looks like something my office would do, looks like something the office I came from would do, looks like probably something from TPT, you know, it looks like something from any of our offices. And there's lessons to be learned by looking at those buildings. Again, right? It's chunked, right? It's broken into many discrete bits and pieces so that it doesn't read as all one big thing. This 3-story brick base has a 1.5-story cast stone top. Then it sits next to a 4-story brick base with deeply punched openings, right? The deeply punched openings aren't in the smaller piece, they're in the bigger piece. That was a strategy, right? The taller spaces, the rooftop spaces weren't in stone, they're in metal. Again, because it's on top of a much taller building. And then the gasket between them is another residential opportunity, but treated as a very dark mass. The uniform skin, right? The idea of a skin being in effect, one color and letting everything kind of pale away from it. The base is a tall base, as you can see on the right, because that's the street corner. But as it turns the corner, it actually starts to drop down and stay down, right? It stays down. But then the first floor behind in the alley, right, has 2-story height openings or arcade. And then this corner that faces the alley and the street is treated with a contrasting color. So little moves like that help the building turn the corner in a very graceful fashion, and at the same time relate to like historical context by stepping or terracing back from it. I love this little notch here, this sort of like when I think of putting my key into a slot in my front door, I think about all of those zigs and zags that the key has in it, the shape of that sort of male component, and then I imagine what that lock set, right, must look like inside, and that's sort of what is happening here. So when I see these little conditions like this happening in buildings, I think about that how that might be relating to something across the street and how that might have a conversation with the context. The same building showing you the condition of the terrace and how those really are part of urban life. I'll blow that up so you can see it. This is a rendering, so we should talk a little bit about money shots as you look at these. The first floor. I love how the first floor is this 2-story arch, right? The first floor is given this 2-story arch. This is the same building, but the first floor is set back in this gallery space to create a soffit where you have the 3 downlights, 1, 2, and 3. So the retail space is set back from the normal skin, but the residence above, that floor of the residence is that soffit. So this is a very sophisticated decision. And that same view, that same space looked at from an oblique angle. Notice the sidewalk, notice the planters. Remember the male-female keyhole that was happening obviously on that view. That's the one we were just talking about, but it actually starts to operate more assertively on the front facade in L-shaped and Z-shaped and T-shaped kinds of conditions, so that it allows this big hefty mass to be read as something smaller. This building is in the wheelhouse and scale of your buildings. I think we talked about this last week.
Mark?
Actually, you showed us that. Go ahead.
Anna just texted me asking you to re-invite her to the chat.
Sure. I can do that. She having trouble tonight?
Apparently she lost power for a second.
Oh, dear.
It's back now, but...
Okay, thanks. Cool, done. So we talked about this last week. Color, obviously. Narrow sights. I really appreciate these guys looking at ways of creating these compositions that are varied and modulating as they run their length or as they run their height. I appreciate the simple. It's a lovely piece. It's probably a Lumion rendering. The courtyard again. And I think that was a rogue shot. Again, that sort of keyhole notch, that mortise, that operates very successfully. two buildings really joined at the base. This is really interesting. When we go to Cincinnati, we're going to see a piece by Moore, Rubel, Udell, the Steger Center, and it uses these double height dormers or bays, rather, right? See these two bays here? They're kind of like when you open a can of dog food, speaking of beagles barking, right? When you open a can, you pull the metal lid away from the body of that can, and it creates that kind of new composition, right? So these dormers, these bay windows do that same thing. They give you a view out to a specific location down the street, but they enhance the floor area to which they're serving. So this is a very effective way of activating the skin in much the way that inset windows and balconies do, in much the way the variety of sort of materials and the way you skin it does. Another great little building, turning the corner and marking a triangular lot. This is a terrific piece. Again, taking a cube as a brick base, right, and then letting things stack up upon it. The diagram, right? Thinking of a way to describe your work so that it's clear to everyone looking at it. So thinking of like how your work fits into the site in an ideal way, and then allowing the context to react to it, right? And then distorting it so that you can create other virtues or aspects, right? Like a corner park, and then letting these things relate to conditions outside of the site. That's what I was talking about with the mortise, the key and the keyhole, letting the architecture point to or react to conditions beyond, so that there's kind of a knitting that starts to happen between context and form, and then allowing the diagram to actually explain all of that. And then you end up having kind of a drawing like these two at the very bottom that shows the synthesis of that. This is a really, really important kind of drawing for you to be doing as you move towards the second benchmark. It's a way of explaining how you actually created form and how you modify form, and in terms of letting the context or program operate on it. And that drawing, that series of drawings was for this particular piece. Another terrific small 4-story apartment building. You know, this is again on the scale of the things you're looking at, right? A 3-story building with a 4th floor that's set back. 4-story building on a retail ground floor to hold the corner, right? The use of simple colors like white and yellow with a complementary olive drab green, OD green, and then letting more or sort of autumnal colors like the orange operate as a kind of a kicker color on the courtyard. The idea maybe is that these street facades have their own color palette, but like courtyard facades are an opportunity to introduce more varied materials, more varied palette choices. The elevation. The section. The diagram, right? Taking kind of a pure program sort of diagram, right, of your site. You all did these, you all have these in your wheelhouse, right? You all have these in your portfolio right now. And then starting to think about how, you know, in this case, how this property and this piece of land gets sun. So you push down on the mass here, right? And that action of pushing, like when you press dough, right, to make bread, when you push down on something, there's going to be a reaction against that push. And that means that this piece is going to rise as this gets compressed. And then views, right, to one direction or the other, allow that push to get reoriented, and then the drawing is complete. And there's that building. Again. This is actually a building by Richard Meyer. This is actually his own museum for his models. His models are all upstairs. This is all outdoor space upstairs. So this is just a 3-story building that sits next to much taller properties to the left and to the right. Again, real simple materials, just brick, just metal, just glass. But notice how the brick has its own detail. So you get these little moments in the vertical where it's rotated out to give a lot of texture. We saw this one earlier. And I think that's it. Okay. So I wanted to have this conversation tonight to sort of open up the palette a little bit, to make sure that as you move into your work for the 16th, you're thinking about a lot of things right now, right? You're thinking about the certainly the floor plans and the units and the site plan. That's all stuff you've been thinking a lot about, and that's great. But now you need to be applying that same rigor to the let's call it the sort of architectural outcome, right? The elevations, the massing, the three-dimensionality of this building, and the materials that it's going to be sheathed in, and the way that you can start to imbue those new sort of these new questions with more design rigor. So I wanted to open up that conversation by reminding you of what's out there. And also, when we go to Cincinnati on Saturday, you're going to see some of those same virtues happening in the many important buildings that you're going to see on that campus. I don't think there's another campus with as much important modern architecture as the University of Cincinnati. So I'm really excited that you're going to go. That's all I got. Okay, who am I going to talk to tonight? Anna, you're here.
Oh, yeah. I'm first. I need to log off real quick and log back on. We lost power, and so I was waiting for the internet to reconnect, and it finally just reconnected. But I'm on my phone, so. Okay,
so I'll wait for you to come back. And then who else am I going to talk to tonight? Nathan. Yep. And who else? All right. Thanks, Nate. And then Thomas. Okay, good. So I'll see the rest of you on, did anybody go to the Juan Rios lecture?
Shoot.
Okay.
Forget.
No problem. It might be on YouTube, so it might be worth checking. I wasn't able to go myself, so I was hoping to get, it is the same guy that I had juried with. I saw his picture. I think Carl had a picture of him on something on Instagram, so I know it's the same guy. I remember meeting him. Anyways, I'll see you, the rest of you, on Wednesday, and then I'll expect grade sheet updates from you unless you don't have any, and then I'll just send them out based on where you were before with my own updates. All right? Any questions? Cool, thanks. Okay, Anna, are you back, or do you need to leave and come back? Looks like you're back.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I was able to get back on, so that's good.
Was the power outage? Are you having weather out there? It's a beautiful night.
No, it's our wiring in our house is terrible. My husband was ironing his dress shirts, and if you have, we're pulling too much power from too many things. I don't know. It's stupid. So anytime someone's ironing, it's like you can't have someone ironing and, you know, this certain light on, and it's stupid.
So one of my favorite scenes in a movie that everyone watches at least 18 times over the Christmas break is called A Christmas Story.
Oh, yeah.
And I love when he tries to plug the Christmas tree in after they've decorated it. And, you know, he's got all the plugs in plugs. The same thing on the Chevy Chase movie. But, you know, the sparks are always flying when he adds one more sort of appliance to the demand.
Yeah.
Right? That sounds like your house.
Yeah, and our house it was built in 07. It's not even that old. It's just wasn't equipped for.
That's bad.
It's terrible. Like if I was ironing and my husband was running the vacuum in the hallway, every single time we blow a fuse. So it's
That's poor wiring.
Yeah,
very
that is.
poor.
Yeah, that's too
I'm
bad.
like, you should be able to iron a shirt and have someone running the vacuum in the next room, you know?
Yeah. So, well, I guess where I'd say to you and your husband is start buying him shirts, the no iron shirts at Brooks Brothers when they go on sale.
Yeah.
Take
Yeah.
stuff away from the iron.
Yeah. That's what we try to get the wrinkle-free ones, you know? But
Or wear sweaters, right? Wear
Right.
sweaters over them.
yeah, so you don't see the wrinkles.
Okay, what do you want to talk about tonight?
Okay, so I've been working on a few different things since we last talked. I mostly was looking at the roof line because I started getting some ideas after I talked to you last time. And so I started playing around with that, and I'll screen share. Okay, so actually let me go into, first I'm going to go
That's
to,
what
I actually reverted the floor plan back to what I had initially had it at.
Oh, I see.
Because as I was looking at it in elevation, like you had been talking about, you know, expressing the vertical, or like expressing the individual units more than anything. And the way that I had it, really wasn't it was becoming kind of difficult to break that up. And so,
Oh.
yeah, see, so by putting it back, I was able to express like, okay, these are the individual units. And it worked better with what I was trying to do with the roof line as well.
Can you orbit
Mhm.
up? Can I see this balcony roof?
Yeah. Do you want to see it in 3D?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's fine. Here,
Oh, I see.
So I did the butterfly, and then I just took like that little corner and tilted it down. So it still speaks to the gable roofs without being a gable roof, you know? And it kind of helps to further, you know, express the individual units.
So can you rotate around even more? It looks like that, I see. This is very interesting. Can you rotate all the way around? I want to see the back.
Oh, yeah.
now.
Mhm. Yeah, the back side, I essentially did the same thing. The one spot that is a little weird is this far, you know, looking at it, the right corner, kind of that's highlighted right here.
Well, can you slide your model because your cursor and
Oh, can you see?
I actually like that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, because initially there wasn't this wall here, and the
Yeah.
roof came down, and I was like, okay, well, I got to do something because it looked obviously weird just having the roof.
Where is your ceiling in all of this?
This for
Second floor ceiling. What's the second floor ceiling line?
the second floor ceiling line is technically here. Let me go into.
Is it just a
elevation.
few feet? Yeah, there it is. So it's really at the transom. So this roof that comes down is really at the ceiling line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the lowest point there, where it tips down.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can you rotate counterclockwise in elevation?
Oh, okay. Counterclockwise. So you want to see? Oh man, no. I'm
I
confused.
sort of want to see the.
You want to see how the side profile is?
Yeah, but I want to see it. I want to see the architecture in that elevation. So I don't want to see it as a pure elevation. I don't know if that makes sense. I want to see the elevation obliquely.
Okay. I wonder,
So rotate it like 10 degrees.
10 degrees. Oh boy. That's the 2D wheel. I don't know if I know how to do that. Let me see.
You're a Revit master.
I thought so. That I don't know how to
Okay,
do.
can you just go to 3D and rotate?
Yeah, so
Go
kind of
get me down to the eye level.
like there-ish.
Yeah, now keep turning. Slow down, keep going. Is this the side I want to see?
This is the like the back. You want to see the
Go,
front?
go to the front.
Okay.
I want to see the other direction, so rotate all the way around.
Okay.
Okay, now slow down. Oh, too far.
Yeah.
And get me at the eye level again. And open it up a little bit more. I want to see more of the facade. Yeah, so you see where that roof comes down
Yeah.
and it hits the, it looks like block, where your cursor is, where I see your cursor.
Mm-hmm.
So there's like a big drain issue there, so you'll have to
Mm-hmm.
have a downspout there. And then this change of like masonry to like siding
Mhm.
is kind of interesting. I feel like there's some line work that you're missing there. And you also have, like in these things that project out, you've got masonry and block again kind of intersecting. So wherever there's wood siding, you're going to need a bottom board, and you're
Yeah.
going to need a corner board unless they're mitered, and
Mhm.
you're going to need an end board, like a vertical end board.
Mm-hmm.
You follow what I'm saying? So you
Yeah.
need to
Like-
indicate all of that.
Trim.
Yep.
essentially. Yeah.
Yep, unless you have a different attitude about wood that you're trying to talk to here.
Mhm.
The other thing is these fascias are kind of snug to the wall.
Yeah.
They would actually at least be one or two boards proud of the wall.
Mhm.
Have you looked at them as being prouder than that?
Yeah, I had considered, having them. I wanted them to be snug to the wall. I wanted to not have a real big overhang, essentially, of the fascia. But so I mean, if I did, it would be, a pretty small amount. So I don't know.
Are there any opportunities for windows on these end cap units?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's what I was playing around with. I was trying to get like kind of the front face and the back face, and then there's definitely opportunity on these end cap units to put some windows. So
Can you rotate around again so I can see this elevation on frontally?
here, do you want to see it in 3D or in?
No, it doesn't need to be.
Here. Okay.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, I was trying to play with different, because one thing that I noticed, like in a lot of the examples that you've shown us and some of the case study examples that I'd been looking at, is that there was like a play with different window widths and heights.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really, really cool. And even in many of the houses in the neighborhood, actually, there's different widths and heights of windows. It's not just your
Right.
your standard. So, and I was looking at maybe incorporating a few more that speak maybe to that existing house across the street that I'm working on as well.
Anna, I feel I'm looking at this thing a little bit more right now, and I feel like I'm a little confused about materials. So the double window and transom on the second floor is in a wood skin, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And then it turns the corner
Mhm.
and it returns back into the unit at an angle,
Mm-hmm.
and it looks like it has block above the doors there. Is that it?
Yeah. No, I need to because that's one wall. That wall extends from the ground level up. If I was thinking, I would have drawn it separately, so I may have to go redraw that wall in because I want that siding to wrap into that recess and then along that back wall, so that it, emphasizes that contrast. So I was trying to figure out how to do it without having to redraw all that in, but I may have to just redraw it
Now I
in.
understand. So it's
Yeah.
kind of lagging right now, and I guess
Yeah.
I'm tripping on the sort of logic of the materials here, but I guess I'm hearing you say you haven't sort of gone through that quality check yet with these things.
Right.
And is the wall behind the railing, which you're showing as wood, is that in the same plane as the front door?
It's actually, it projects forward a little bit.
Which wall projects forward?
The upper level
Oh.
wall, the
wood wall?
The wood wall, yeah, there we go. I couldn't think. Yeah, so the wood wall actually projects, like if you were to remove that balcony, it would project just like the that main projection.
Okay.
And I plan on adding at least a small window there because that's actually like the closet for the master. But there's definitely room for a window there, so I
Yep.
think I will add at least some sort of small window,
Uh-huh.
just to break the
Sure.
facade a little bit. So
I'm looking up the work of a British architect who I've always loved. I have one of his books, and oh geez. So his name is James McGowan, but apparently there's some handsome Canadian actor named James McGowan, and he just came up. So
oh,
hold on. Yeah, it's McGowa. For some reason, they're not coming up. I may have to find a better. These buildings are really so special and unusual. I just James McGowan. Maybe I'm not spelling it right. I can't be sure. I'll forget about it. I'll have to find it for you. In any event, his work is interesting too because his work uses the this sort of material palette that you're looking at, and he does some very interesting things with windows and how he articulates them within the skin. And I was going to share that with you, and I can't understand why I can't find his stuff on the internet here, because I know his work is really, really important. So I got to be spelling it right. Good Lord. Well, I'm having a brain cramp here, so never mind. Okay, let's keep going on. Let's keep going on this then. Are the roofs going to be like a metal skin, like a standing seam roof?
you know, I'm not entirely sure yet. I'll go to the roof plan. I have it, that is not the, oh yeah, that is, okay, there we go. I have it shown right now, like with the texture of like a typical shingled roof, but
Yeah.
I definitely don't want to just do like an asphalt shingle. So metal, I think, would be interesting. It would be interesting to see how that works with those little angled pieces.
Right.
So that's something I wanted to look into. For now, I just have it shown, you know, as is, just to, you know, express that it is a roof. But yeah, I definitely want to just do an asphalt roof. So I hadn't actually considered metal. I was trying to think.
Yeah, I might consider like a standing seam metal.
Yeah. Okay.
Because you can let the water that runs to the low point, which
Yeah.
is that spine, you can raise that spine to the middle, so it's taller in the middle. See, metal has less sort of friction than asphalt, right? In
Yeah.
terms of water, and you could create a profile so that there's a high point in the very middle, and then it pitches to the east end and the west end, and when the fold of the butterfly meets the west wall and the east wall, that's an opportunity for like a scupper and a downspout
Yeah.
from a kind of a detail perspective.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking. I definitely, I mean, obviously with the butterfly roof, that's kind of how you would typically route the water. So I thought that would be kind of cool.
Yeah, and you would have
on
you would have crickets and, you know, up there in that butterfly. That's definitely there, and you probably want to draw that, but the idea of acknowledging how that water gets off with some sort of like gutter and downspout is going to be important for some people.
Yeah.
Okay, what else do you want to go over?
I started also looking at the existing, let me go to,
The existing house?
yeah, the existing house and, you know, kind of the area surrounding it.
Right.
So these two like wings coming off of it would be, I have to play around with their form a bit, and their size, but those would be, I actually took the greenhouses out from behind the residences.
I see that.
And left that as just gardens, and then that way each unit, like you had talked about last time, you know, there was one unit that didn't even have its own lawn.
Right. Well, just because the way they were flipping and flopping.
Yeah, the way they were flipping and flopping. So, you know, going back to this layout allowed each unit to have its own little grassy area, and then to have a set of garden beds. And at first I was keeping the greenhouses there, but then when I was looking into some ideas for the existing residents, I actually found this cool house I can show you in a minute, that it's actually a house that's a greenhouse, like I don't know, people live in it. It's pretty cool. So I started to think of how I could incorporate that into, without completely tearing apart the existing house, like start to incorporate that idea. And so I was looking at kind of these natural moments where, you know, I could sort of like insert a greenhouse. So there's that one to the right there, there's that little curved moment. It's like, it continues all the way up to the second level.
Right.
And so I thought, you know, that might be a natural spot to kind of have that insertion point. And then to the left, there's that part towards the front where it dips in. So I thought that might be a good spot to put a larger greenhouse. So I think I want to play with, you know, the shape and the, you know, the length of them, because they feel a little awkward, but I think that's kind of what I want to do, and have like the main floor, the upper left there, those three kind of same size rooms would be like units, and then having maybe not all of the rest of the lower level, but at least a good portion of the rest of the lower level being more public, you know, or like kind of shared space. So having like a shared kitchen, because those units are very small. It's basically enough for each unit to, I'm wanting each unit to have its own toilet if possible.
Sure.
Its own bathroom, but I have to play around with the layout. But
So Anna, what did you say these greenhouses are? What's the function in those things? What's going to happen in them?
well, there'll be definitely, you know, traditional greenhouses, and that's where there's going to be stuff grown. But I also saw them as being, you know, places where it'd be like a community engagement space as well. So that could be where presentations are done. That could be where, you know, there's like the teaching, like if there was a farmers in residence sort of program, could be where they're teaching, you know. So and it could be, I liked the idea of the greenhouse because it's something that can occur year round, you know.
Right.
In Michigan. And I want to do also like flanking those greenhouses, having some exterior gardens, but the greenhouses are nice because, you know, like I said, being in Michigan, we can use them year round. So they would be for, you know, whoever's in the in-residence as a place for them to, on the one hand, do their own sort of research, but then as a place of community engagement as well. So they would be more, you know, I mean, those would be the most public components of the building. Whereas the more internal spaces are going to be a little bit more for the in-residence.
Mm-hmm.
I can go to 3D view. I still got, obviously, I have a lot of stuff to work out with it, but I was playing with, I'm going to play with the shape, like I said, of the greenhouses, but I want to have the sloping roof, partially because it's kind of what you typically see with a greenhouse is some sort of sloping roof. It's kind of hard to tell here because it's a pretty gradual slope. I may have to increase it a bit more, but I wanted it to speak to the, you know, that sloping of the butterfly roof across the street. And played around a little bit with the front facade, so that like double height curved bay, those windows are, those are the existing. There's some details I have to add
Can you
that are
rotate?
existing.
Can I orbit around this?
Yeah. So, and I have some roofing details and stuff to add. Right now it has just a porch, so, you know, I'm gonna, you know, create a balcony that can be accessed from the upper level. I was thinking of doing the same thing in the back as well. Not necessarily that same layout, but having
And I feel like the width of these, or the depth of these greenhouses, needs to be narrower.
okay.
I feel like the front facade of that west greenhouse needs to be back, you know, like a foot from that corner.
Okay, so step it back from.
Yeah, because it shouldn't be right at the curve. It's too clumsy that way.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think, you know, as I drew them in, it was helpful to, you know, to start to visualize how they look, but I want to play with them so that they make sense. And I may have to make them maybe not as long. I don't know.
That's another thing. I guess it would help to know what kind of program is happening in there.
Yeah.
How does that measure up?
Mm-hmm.
What does it look like in plan? Can you go to the other orbit all the way around now and look at the other one?
Yeah.
And similarly, like this one needs to be even wider or deeper. So this one actually needs to be a little bit more away from the curve. It's weird how that bay window is inset like that.
It is. It was kind of a strange but unique feature on that house, that it's inset in that way. I don't know what the reasoning was for that. I don't know if it was, I suppose if they had a setback of some kind and they.
Yeah, maybe. That's just a weird, I can't wrap my mind around that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're saying make this one deeper, make the other one shallow.
Yeah,
more.
just enough to make sure that they resolve themselves in terms of where they start off of the existing house.
Mm-hmm. Do you think they should start in the same spot, or you think it's fine that they're staggered a bit, or?
I have no problem with their stagger. I think it relates to, you know, the interior plan maybe more than anything.
Yeah.
Although I think that bow is going to wreak havoc on the roof plan of that greenhouse.
Oh yeah, that I know. I had debated about maybe just like saying, okay, that is just, if I were to remove that entire bow and then that ends up being just like an opening, and then infilling it with something else, but because I realized that, I'm like, that's going to be a weird moment where that meets with the greenhouse.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, you may need to do a gasket there,
mhm.
right? Or you may need to move it so that it's not at the bow at all.
Yeah,
So I would look at that.
that's true. It could still like address it, but maybe not.
Hmm.
Maybe not align. You know, maybe one like the back edge aligns with one edge of that bow.
Is this model also kind of deficient on the number of windows that are happening on the east and west facades?
Yeah. There's.
You need to catch that up.
What's that?
You need to catch that model up.
Yeah, definitely. This was I didn't add any windows to what I had initially had because I was playing around with more you know, the greenhouses and then, you know, laying out some walls in the interior. So yeah, I definitely am going to add the,
Because I think that's going to influence things too.
yeah, that's true. If I look at where the existing openings are.
I also feel like the site is still kind of like the leftover space, and I don't feel like you've been sort of thinking about the program for it. I know that you're saying now, well, these greenhouses are going to see the sort of first kick, you know, in the football game. This is the first kickoff, and there's a lot of game left to be played. But and I like the idea that you start with the greenhouses as a way of setting the note or the tone for what you're going to do in the in this yard here to the east of this building. But I feel like you need to be, you know, moving into that really quickly.
Yeah, I know, I agree.
What is the ground plane like? What's happening in this vacant land?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there'll definitely be some garden beds, but I do need to look more into, you know, now that I've started with the greenhouses, looking more into creating some other spaces for community engagement. So it's
Right.
not just gardens. You
Well,
know?
or it's not just lawn.
Right. Yeah, no, and that's, I mean, definitely not my intent. You know, I mean, maybe a little bit of grassy area, but
Right.
the intent is definitely for this to be less residential, you know.
Good.
So yeah, I think I'll play around with the greenhouses a bit more and really develop that
Okay.
site. I started laying out, you know, some of these lots. I'm going to add just like I was going to, you know, block out some footprints for some of these adjacent houses and start to show more detail. This upper right is where Muffy, where the Muffy Gardens are. So I'm going to add some more detail there as well so that it can start to all read together. And then, you know, looking more at the overall as well. So, yeah, I think I definitely have a bit more to do with the site for sure.
Okay. Well, I'll keep moving.
Yeah.
And take advantage of the time. I'm happy to talk to you over the weekend if you have any questions, although our time is really going to only be available on Sunday in terms of my availability because I'll be traveling the other day, but I'm open to that. All right.
All right.
Anything else, Anna?
No, I think that's all. I think I've
Cool.
plenty to do. So
Yeah,
I'll
these
definitely.
townhomes are really kind of quirky and interesting. I'm very attracted to them. Keep flushing them out in terms of the windows, and I also feel like the windows are still kind of like stock windows.
Yeah.
Like you haven't gone through the process of like saying, okay, Anna, now this is where they gotta go,
Yeah.
but how big can they be, and how can I start to compose them
Yeah.
so that they and what is my attitude about windows in wood walls and windows in block walls, and what's going to happen to the windows as a vocabulary element. And I think once you start going through that process, those are going to get really interesting.
Yeah, that's
Like,
something I haven't
it's
thought
not
of.
just the framing of them, and it's not just what they're punched into in terms of wall surface, but it's also the size of the windows. That's something I hope you also found in Allison Brooks's work, is that you start to play with the proportions of these things, and they really start to impact the architecture.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's what I definitely, I was starting to do that a bit more in the front.
I know.
I want to play around with those a little bit more, but then, start to carry that through the sides and the back as well. Cause yeah, definitely a lot of these are very, kind of your standard.
And I'm not saying that it needs to be all glass. I'm saying that, there's nothing more powerful than a small window in a big wall.
Oh yeah.
Right. But it's also got to be balanced by big windows in small walls, for example, or in other places, so that everything's telling a story.
Right.
Okay, cool. I'll let you go.
All right. Thanks for the
Anna.
input.
Tell your husband to stop ironing tonight.
Okay, I will.
Have a good night.
You too. Thanks.
So Thomas is last.
I am next.
Okay, Nate. You have the floor.
All right. So, I guess I'll just start with a screen share and then we'll go from there.
Cool.
Oh, wait, no, that's not it. That's you. There we go. All right, so we left off last week with me reevaluating the research, right?
Yes, sir.
And representing that effectively. So I think I've successfully finished that up. So you saw this last week.
Yes.
I don't know if you saw this one last week. I was just combined. This is essentially more for a reference for me at a later date. I was combining everything that we did as a group together.
Good.
And I'll probably breeze through this when it comes time to present, but I want this here.
Good. It's a good placeholder, and you need to have this anyways.
Yeah, and I'm referencing back to it a little bit later anyway, so I put it in. Then I redid this a little bit, made it clearer what was going on with what was happening. Not too much, though. So I started with the basic research of missing middle, switched to an introduction to the north end, did a preliminary. So then I zoomed into the analysis, property analysis. You've seen all these things. I'm just condensing it all.
Nice.
And then
these are nice, consistent, clean plates.
Yep. So this is what I was focusing on. I've got up to 10 pages in now. So I started looking at the case studies and trying to integrate them in. This is the single most formal case study that I was looking at. It's the Incremental Development Alliance was recommended to me by somebody from Dan Paralek's firm. When I was watching one of his lectures online, he had said that getting missing middle housing financing was incredibly difficult.
Really tough.
So I sent him an email, or his firm an email, and asking them for some more references as to how we can deal with that.
Fantastic.
And he sent me a few links on his website, which were more or less useful, but this was really interesting. So the Incremental Development Alliance was founded by John Anderson, who is a architect somewhere in Nevada, I think. But what he specializes in is working with developers, and I think he's got his own development portfolio, his own real estate portfolio as well. So these are essentially stock projects that he markets to developers, and then changes and modifies them on a project by project basis. So there's some really interesting things that are going on with these and how they work with building codes and regulations. Let's start with this one right here. The elevatorless 3-story. So how do you create density while still being able to afford what you're building? Because once you have to put an elevator in, you add a significant amount of cost, and if the rents aren't high enough, you can't even afford to build the building in the first place.
That's right.
So working with the codes and regulations, this is one of the solutions that he came up with, and he gives these out for free. I'm just referencing back to them. So what his solution was to put a single ground floor accessible unit in.
That's right.
Which is all you need. You just need
That's
one
right.
on the ground floor. The only problem is if you do all commercial on the base floor, in terms of ADA requirements, the first floor becomes the second floor. So you need to put an elevator in to get somebody up to the second floor.
But if you have a ground floor unit,
yeah, so that's
residential, you don't need it. So the way he's done it is he's got the 2 pink retail spaces and the yellow ADA unit in the back. That's exactly right.
Yep. And some other things here, low cost construction with wood frame and sprinklers allows 4 units of floor and 125 unit max exit distance from within the unit. So from here to the exit.
Well, sitting on the
corridor.
toilet, through the door, around the bed, out the door, 125 feet to the front door. That's the maximum travel. That actually went up about 5 or 6 years ago from 50. It used to be 50 feet. But then the code realized that people have walk-in closets and big bathrooms, and that even in like nice condos, it was becoming really impossible to do that. So they actually went to 125 from 50. But so we do 3-story apartment buildings all day long, but the best ones are the ones where there's at least 1 unit on the ground in a chunk like these 2 here, separated by the stairway, because you don't need 2 stairways and you don't need an elevator so long as you have ground floor res.
Yeah, and when we move over to this one, he worked on this one in 2008 or 9 or something during the economic downturn. He calls it the form follows finance fourplex.
Cool.
Because essentially you can build it if you can get $1 a square foot, I think. So
right.
if you can get $1 a square foot, you can afford to build this, is what he said.
Right.
So what was particularly interesting about this one is how he was navigating his way around the FHA mortgages. So if you take a look at the ground floor here, he's got his non-residential unit right here.
Yeah.
And he's got the 4plex over here. And only problem is if this entire thing was commercial, it would be over 20%. And that can't happen in the FHA mortgages. So what he did was he put in an outdoor storage / bike closet for the units and brought that square footage below 20%.
That's
so
cool.
I don't know. When I was looking at these, I was just really fascinated by how he was using the regulations to his advantage to get what he wants to get done.
And this is exactly what we do in the office.
So, yeah, I found this to be incredibly interesting.
I'm glad.
And then I took, just because I was interested in learning a little bit more about some of the work that his firm does after seeing that, I looked at his website and found a project that is kind of similar to what I have to deal with.
I see that, especially the thing on the left. The site plan has the same sort of depth issue, right?
Yeah, so this particular site is 14th Street would be the equivalent of facing Brush.
Sure.
So instead of facing the side street, this house is decided to face the larger street for whatever reason. So he wanted to split this into 2 units, so he split the lot. He's got 2 units on both of these, I think. A studio space above the garage on both of these units, and then a 2-story single-family home. So the carriage house attached or not attached.
With outdoor parking in both cases.
Yes.
So
And you see how
does
the building.
the driveway on the left
Hmm.
is to an alley. I see. Very interesting. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh no, that's fine. I spent a lot of time looking at this too. So he even managed to get a backyard on this relatively small
that.
unit.
Well,
mean,
even on the
granted,
even on the corner unit, he's got a small yard.
Mhm. Granted, this lot is larger than the lots that I'm dealing with, but at the same time, it's a similar condition where I have to deal with maneuvering how these buildings relate to each other and the property lines and.
Well, he's also, he's respecting the setback. He's taking advantage of the alley.
Mhm.
He's rotating garages to either serve the alley or the front. And if they're going to face the main street, he sets them back, right? He occupies the garage with a stairway. I like how the stairway is kind of ghosted in the floor plans of these garages. And that's actually they're ghosted in the units themselves, so that's kind of interesting.
Mhm.
And he's got your big ass tree too.
Yeah. That is, yeah, I guess he does, doesn't he? Didn't cut him down, so that's good.
And these drawings are just beautiful. These elevations are just exquisite.
Yeah, this is an older project, I think. So these were just the graphics that he had available online.
Sure.
So.
I'm glad you found these.
Next, I found one of the firms that I occasionally browse the website of.
Mhm.
They've got a blog, Build LLC. They are one of the more prominent architectural firms that specialize in development in Seattle, and they do a pretty good job of talking about what's happening in the city and what they're building and why and all that. A while back, they did an analysis of micro-housing. So I'm not claiming credit for any of this. This was them. And I'm just recommunicating what their analysis
We
here.
understand. We understand.
So
Supermax prisons.
yeah,
Brilliant.
they were just examining the square footages of these units. So when we're looking at the micro-housing, this is a typical micro-housing unit and from Cubics Apartments, which is apparently only a few blocks away from where they are. 222 square feet, which is really, really small. Then you've got a dorm room, which is essentially, for all intents and purposes, the same size as this micro unit. Just
Yeah, but it's twice the density.
And
Mhm.
then they looked at a typical modern apartment with a single bedroom and 600 square feet. And then they put the Supermax prison cell in there too, just
Nice.
interestingly enough, the Supermax is, of course, the most expensive.
That's right.
So what they came up with in their analysis is that they determined that this unit was a little bit too small for their liking, and they wanted to recommend a minimum micro-housing unit size for 325 square feet so that we could get a full sink in the restroom.
Did you see the new units in Curbed by Bedrock and Kramer Group?
I have not.
Why don't you fire that up and pull that up?
All right,
It's
what am I searching
Kramer
for?
Design, Kraemer, Kramer Design Group, Microlofts. It's a new project under construction right now, and it was in. So I want you to look at it in
Curb Detroit?
Curb,
Or-
yeah.
Is this it?
Yeah, but go down. No, that's their offices.
Yeah, okay. Back. Might have to go to their website.
Go to Curbed, but it should be in the news.
I'll search.
Yes, that's search there. Right.
What am I looking for?
Micro loft, Kramer Design, micro units or whatever.
Seek office space.
Oh, for crying out loud! It just came out. It should be right up on top.
Market Loft building? No, that's not it.
It's on Grand River.
Here, is this it? Micro home? No, that's Seattle. Let's try their website. Oh wait, here it is in. This might work. I don't know how many pictures there are going to be, but no.
Well, the renderings were really good, so I don't know where they're.
No, shoot, no pictures.
Type in Bedrock micro units. See what that
Bedrock.
gets you. Yeah, you should be able to get that. You'll see the renderings. Go to images.
Images.
It's a 28 grand. That's it. Go back one, please. And go to Bedrock unveils. So look at image 3.
Oh, shoot.
The third image.
Mhm.
So these are the images.
Hmm.
So you see things like the window seat is the couch
Mhm.
with storage beneath. The bed has storage beneath it. Next to the lamp on the painting wall is the mechanical unit. So it's like a hotel room. And I don't know if you click on that image or maybe the fourth image in the little thumbnail. That's the flip view.
Yeah.
So this is from the window seat. And behind the bed is the range.
Mhm.
And then the bathroom behind that and the front door.
Yeah, and I can already see they've got a sink in the bathroom. It's large enough for that to.
Yeah.
So a shower right here, behind the bed,
Yep.
and the range, and then a sink, and presumably the toilet on the other side of the sink.
Yeah. I don't know if you can. Does it? You click on these or?
I can try, see where it takes me. God.
Jeez, pop-ups everywhere. Must be an election. Okay, so that's the other shot. That's the kitchen with the microwave and the refrigerator. And it's the refrigerators, it's a standard depth refrigerator, the 32-inch refrigerator, but it's also built out so that it's swallowed up by the millwork, which is also the closet.
We just saw that one. Yep.
Yeah, there's the bathroom.
And
so it's pretty cozy, and I think they're like $350. Scroll down and look at the article. Maybe there's some language.
260 square feet.
So those are small. There's Jamie. That's Jamie Witherspoon. He's their architect. He used to be with me. He moved over to Bedrock about 2 years ago.
Okay. Anyway, I was just trying to take a look at that.
So 260. So they're just a little bit bigger than your typical, right?
At least in Seattle, anyway.
Yeah.
And then, as an interesting comparison to that, they had another blog post where they were talking about their typical recommendations for single families. So they've got bedrooms that are essentially the size of these micro units, which is what.
Wow.
Bathroom 6. So this adds up to like 1,800 square feet.
Sure, that's bigger than my house.
Yeah, as a comparison, anyway.
Yeah.
Their typical family sizes.
That's a great plate.
So then I started to put all this stuff together. Shoot. this image is such a high resolution. I gotta turn it off. There we go. So I started by looking at and mapping out those things, the money analysis that Mariah did, into a graph scenario. So I think it's relatively straightforward. Here, I'm worrying about the current residence rental affordability. So the North End average is $22,000 per year. And that range is at $1 a square foot, assuming 30 to 40% of their income. That range is somewhere between 525 and 700 square feet that they can afford. And then it keeps going from there. North End family average, the average Detroit.
Right.
And then I put the middle of that together, and then I averaged it, and I threw in a bell curve right in the middle here, so that I'm not sure whether or not it's entirely relevant, but it struck me as helping me determine that the most units that I should be making, if I was focusing on making sure that the current residents can afford to live in these units, they should be somewhere between 450 and 900 square feet ish. So if we want to get the most, if we want to focus on the largest percentage of the population
that lives there.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I think you're also gonna, I think in Detroit, I think there's an acknowledgement that displacement is wrong, and accolades to you for trying to create a product that does not displace people. But even in new development like this, you would probably find only 20% would be set aside. I mean, you could make it 40% or even 50%, which would be terribly admirable. But like 50% or 40% set aside for the current resident profile.
Yeah. So, and then I did the same thing for the future resident, because I thought it was relevant, because I don't know if this is getting built next year, then
Or
maybe
10
this one
years.
if this one's getting built this year, this one over here might be more relevant. But if it's 10 or 15 years from now, maybe it might even, then maybe we should focus on the Michigan average rather than the current Detroit average today.
Good.
So if when we look at this, we start getting into unit sizes from somewhere to 800 to 1600 square feet, which is essentially a single family home.
Right.
Which the North End already has a pretty significant amount of.
Right.
So I don't know how much we want to focus on that. So I guess when I'm looking at this, the units that I should probably, since we're focusing on missing middle, we should probably stay around to 900 to 1,000 square feet
agree.
max, right?
Yeah, I would agree.
That was the conclusion that I came to after mapping this out graphically. And I don't even know if I want to put micro housing units in the first place, so I might pull that micro housing analysis out. I think I should do some more research into the types of demographics that actually want to live in micro housing, because I'm not 100% convinced that micro housing has a place in a traditional single family home scenario neighborhood like this. If we were in Midtown, I wouldn't even question it. I'm just not convinced that a family of 3 would want, even 2 people in a single micro unit. I don't know. Come on, I just don't see it. So.
Well, I think then, I mean, so there is traction in that demographic, but it's probably working class individuals, single, working at the hospital or working for Quicken Loans. So it's probably individuals that don't have partners.
But when I think about myself, who technically might be able to be considered in that scenario if I found a job downtown.
Yeah, you are in that scenario.
I wouldn't want to live out here. I'd want to be a little bit more closer to the action. I'd want to be in Midtown or Greektown or something like that. I wouldn't want to be quite this far out. So that's just I'm thinking about that, and
Sure.
I might
No, I appreciate that.
I might remove the micro housing analysis case study part because I might decide just to remove it. I'm not sure that it's relevant right now. So then I combined all this together. We know we want 16 residential units per acre minimum to, based on Andres Duani's recommendations for a successful neighborhood, right? We know that we have a 20% to 80% retail to residential ratio for financing purposes. And then from the market analysis research from Jim Tischler, we know that single family and duplex are oversaturated and shouldn't be built if we can avoid it. Triplexes, fourplexes, and row housing are the most in demand. And we know that small plexes and midplexes are satisfied, but if we built one, we could probably consider it feasible because they're just satisfied. They're not oversaturated.
Sure.
And then down here, I just said unit sizes. And I put together my original thought process here. So that is as far as I got in terms of graphics.
No, I appreciate this research, and I'm a little torn. I'm a little ambivalent about not including the micro units, because I think there's a lot of other things in the micro units. I think evident even in this unit, the 28 grand, which might actually be another case study just in terms of showing what 222 or 260 square feet really look like. It's not just that there's less floor space. It's a discussion about designing the floor space and designing the volume in such a way that, it's not an apartment. It's not a supermax prison cell. It's not even a dorm room. It's a unit that is designed so that it maximizes storage and it integrates built-ins, right? And like window seats, to replace couches, right? So there's thinking about how to create a space that is well designed and affordable to run and live in, that doesn't break the bank just to move into. Like, I got to go to IKEA to buy a couch. I got to go to IKEA to get, end tables and things like that. It's thinking about these things as storage opportunities as much as I think anything. You see that in Airstream trailers. You see that in motorhomes, right? You see that in dormitories today, and now you're seeing it in these things. It's going to be interesting to see if these get absorbed. We're renovating right now, Nate, 83 apartments in the old 40 Davenport building, the old Milner Arms apartment building. It's an historic structure right near the Max, on the property of the Max. It's the only property the orchestra does not own. And they're all small. They're 430, they're 450, they're 460 square feet. And we're not thinking of them as micro units, but we are thinking of them in terms of like increasing the efficiency of them and increasing the storage capacity in them, because they will distinguish themselves on the marketplace. Who are they for? They're for the people at the hospital. They're for the Quicken Loans people. They're for people like you. Now, admittedly, right, 40 Davenport is right on the Strip. It's right on Woodward, right at MLK. It's half the trolley ride downtown, or 3 minutes from Midtown. But there's a market for it.
Yeah, I mean, that, and we've got the other aspect of it, which is the more density that I can get into this block, the more money that I can get this developer to make.
That's right.
So,
and I think that's a really important thing. And the other thing I think that you need to take stock of is that you don't have the green space and the open space and the parking opportunities in Midtown that you would in North End. So that there are those sort of suburb attributes that are in play in North End that maybe, yeah, you're not in the thick of things living there, but you have sort of quasi intangible things that make the quality of life a little better for you.
Mm-hmm. So the ultra micro unit, maybe not so much. Maybe
Sure.
I take a look at a 600 square foot unit like this and find a way to condense that down a
Yeah,
little
or
bit.
500, 600, 700, those are tight units. There's no question that you're still
getting it
having
down to
even 350.
Yeah,
Boy, that's
getting
a
it
tough
down
one.
to 500 would be good. Maybe 450 even.
My parents they just left today for Florida. They live in West Branch, right? And they're snowbirds, and they came down last night for Thanksgiving dinner. So we all did that together. And then, so they left today for their 2-day journey, right, to Florida, or 3-day journey. And they moved to Ocala for the winter, right? And they live in like a Prevost trailer, right? That kicks out, with awnings and bay windows to make it more commodious inside and outside, right? But they got nowhere to go but inside. If it's a rainy day, they're kind of like all over each other, unless one of them leaves in their Ford Explorer to go travel and go get groceries or something like that. So I don't know how couples make it in these small quarters. And thinking about my mom and dad, I don't know how they do it personally, but God bless them for trying.
I mean, even when I think about that 200 square foot unit that we were looking at, I spread out so much when I'm doing work that I would probably be using 200 square feet just with my office space, you know?
Sure.
So that wouldn't even come close to being able to work for me. It's just like I need that much in desk space, right?
Sure.
So it wouldn't work for me either. But like if these were desks, I still wouldn't have enough desk space.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, you'd probably put a piece of wood over the bed so that you could, put chairs up against that and draw.
Yeah. I've got 2 desks here, and sometimes I'll pull the desk that's behind me, the table that's behind me over, and then I've got a bookshelf over on my right now. So I just, all the paper and utensils that we use to do the work that we do,
Right. No, I mean, that's sort of the other thing. Like some of these rooms could have like.
It takes the right person to need something like this.
That's right. So, well, cool. This is really good. I think this is really good research that builds your case pretty effectively.
That's what I was.
And I'm glad you did it. I'm glad you contacted Paralect too. That's fabulous.
Yeah, I was just having a really hard time finding the information that I was looking for, and I didn't actually talk to Paralect himself. It was somebody from his office.
Sure, but I'm so glad that they took your inquiry and fed you. That's terrific.
Yeah, they did it within a day too, so I was really impressed by that.
Really fantastic. Mm-hmm. They've created this sort of thing too. So they're trying to get people to bite into it, right? They're trying to get people to accept it. They're kind of like apostles. So, they got to do stuff like that.
Yeah, based on the quickness of the response and the effectiveness of the response, I'd say that he's paying somebody just to maintain and respond to this sort of inquiry, just the website and all that.
Yeah, wow, that's pretty impressive.
So obviously my next step is to put this aside and really start developing the floor plans and site plan and three-dimensionality. And I don't know if I'm probably won't get all that done in 1 week, but
right now, are you and Mateo and his friend going together to Cincinnati? How are you guys getting down there?
Well, I thought Anna was going until tonight, obviously, but okay. I was going to message them and see if they wanted a carpool down there. Yeah. So I haven't done that yet, but
Well,
I can.
let me know what you guys decide, because I have room, but I'm staying on campus, so
You're staying on campus?
well, there's a hotel on campus. So
Oh.
the Marriott is on campus, so I'm staying there. It's right next to the Frank Gehry building. So I'm staying
That's-
in Clifton, which is
That's what,
effective.
120 a night?
No, it's just a little bit more than that. It's probably 100 more than that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I don't know if you want to stay there. I mean, I wouldn't advise that. But there are other hotels. I just
If it was 100 or if it was
yeah.
120,
Well, I
I
mean,
probably
you
would've
could
been
maybe
like-
there's a student rate or something like
Yeah.
that, or maybe you guys can all stay in that together. And,
Well, it depends on whose his friend is. If his
Yeah,
friend
I
is,
don't know.
if it's
Yeah.
girlfriend, then maybe not.
Yeah.
But
or
I'll
maybe.
message him and see what happens.
Yeah, find out and then let me know if you guys need me for anything.
All right.
Okay?
Yeah.
Cool. We'll talk later.
Mhm. Bye.
Thanks. Okay. Judd, are you tonight or are you Nate?
I'm tonight.
Okay, good. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Excellent, thanks. What do you want to talk about?
All right, so I've kind of started developing my apartment style building. I got the units laid out and just started working with the windows. So let me get to a point where I can share it. Okay.
Cool.
So this is looking at that elevation along Brush. So this is kind of standing at Bennett Park.
Yeah.
Missing some railings. I know that's going to change my elevation quite a bit. I think it's going to definitely have to become a part of the design. So some sort of guardrail across the balcony. But we have the the community space that juts out towards you, and then the one-story apartments that also mimic that. And then I started to kind of add in some taller elements.
Sure.
I'm not sure if that becomes clear story windows
Could be.
or do we, that's a mechanical space and you had louvers up there. So it allows me to.
What is the double line that you're pointing to there?
What's that?
What is that? Is that a fascia, that double line? Yeah.
This one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you orbit around? Can I see this in 3 dimensions? Oh, right.
I'm stuck on the roofs to my. I deleted like the flat sloping roofs I had on the individual units.
Yeah.
So I need to go back in and really think about what to do with those yet. But yeah, my focus was mainly on developing this area.
So there's a rhythm of in the second floor units. There's the rhythm of double windows and then double doors, right? Yeah. So, and you've got those pop-ups over the doors.
Correct. So this wall carries through.
But what's behind those doors? Living room space?
Yes.
And it's shared. Right. Have you thought about flipping the living room with the kitchen?
No. Just for
because look at this, look at the size of the living room and the fact that you're walking into it and getting into the bathroom from there.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
I also kind of I might move the bathroom door on the opposite wall so it's closer to the bedroom.
Right.
I might not even have the bathroom off of the kitchen in my conversation. since only one or two people's living there, you know, maybe they use it right off of the bathroom. The door to the bedroom, off of
Door right from the bedroom into the bathroom.
Yeah. But I think the kitchen needs to be off of the front door and in the smaller geometry.
Okay.
And then let the roof volume above be kind of a clerestory for that small room.
Yeah.
To bring light into it for cooking and for doing what people do in the morning and the evening, right? To prepare foods. And then let the living room be the space where you've shown the kitchen, which is larger and, you know, opens up the diagonal of the room, right? From the kitchen out to that.
If I can get rid of the door into the bathroom, that'll definitely help.
Well, sure. It clears up wall space to let you put millwork against it, right?
Yep.
Now let's go back to that elevation or that model. Can I kind of think that one thing is that there's kind of this predictable rhythm of space, window, space, window, space, door, space, door. You know, it's kind of, so if you thought of like now that the living room is in the brown brick thing, maybe that's a big window. Maybe that's 3 windows.
Right.
Or maybe that's like a window that's kind of on both walls. You know, that sort of blends in with the corner, becomes the corner. That might be worth looking at. And I think if you start exploring that in elevation and in this model, you're going to feel better. Also, the pop-up should be as wide as the gray wall below. It should not dog ear out. It should be only that trim. And I would let the facade of that gray clerestory interrupt the roof line.
So bring the roof back.
Interrupt the fascia. Okay.
So the roof would return.
Yes.
Does it return back into
the dormer? Yeah, into the dormer.
I'd still want some sort of covering over the doors, I think, but
it could be a different material.
But yeah, it's a different elevation.
It could be a suspended canopy like you saw tonight.
Right. Yeah. No,
or it could be one sheet of glass on a couple of brackets, or corrugated metal that spills out over the walkway.
Yeah.
I would look at that because right now the roof is really, really a heavy condition. The fascia height is really tall, and it's really heavy for something so small.
Yeah. Okay.
Also, you know, if the living room, Nathan, is in the brown bits, it opens it up to the outdoor corridor, and it opens it up to the north facade.
Right. Yeah, I like the idea because I thought about wrapping the windows, you know, around the corners. But the kitchen, you know, having the casework there and usable counter space, I didn't want too much glazing into it, I guess.
Don't need a lot of glass. Actually, those pop-ups could be even taller.
These ones.
Yeah. They could be another 2-3 feet taller just to get just to activate the roof line and make it a little bit more obvious and to give you an opportunity for glazing up there.
Yep.
One of the favorite things when I lived in the Affleck house at Lawrence, when I was a student, was the kitchen. I just put a picture of the kitchen the other day on Instagram because I was out there for a meeting, and I was like, oh my God, there's 2 walls that have, you know, square windows, operable square windows with screens in them that bring light in from the east and the south during the day. And then I thought to myself, even the moon on a night like tonight was something that came into the kitchen by virtue of that clerestory. And I thought, I'll never see a kitchen space like that ever in my life again.
Right.
You know, it was glorious. So I think the roof is something to sort of think about. Maybe the roof actually conforms to only the living units, and it's a trellis or a pergola there.
Yep. And leave that kind of, I don't know what you want to call it, the open space even more open than what it is.
Because it's going to be kind of dark,
Yeah.
even on a well-lit day.
Right.
But if it's a trellis, like with, you know, bulb lights traced over it, that could be really, really beautiful.
Yeah, it's a nice space.
There could even be a hole in that second floor that looks down onto the ground below. You know, it would have its own railings, but to bring some of that light from through to the first floor, unless there's a room under there. I'm not sure what's happening.
Yeah, I have a unit on the first floor.
Okay, no worries.
I kind of lost, especially on the first floor, I lost the width of
Yeah, I
open
see that
area.
now. Yeah.
So,
But that's okay. It's kind of an alley. I mean, you might be able to push that L north a little bit more, closer to the alley, but and it might be worth looking at that. Very interesting.
Yeah.
I think the decision. I would think hard about that decision of the kitchen living room swap. Does that come into play in all those units? I think it does, doesn't it?
Yep. Yeah, they're all similar.
And so on the south units that are on the corner, so those are bedrooms right on the sidewalk?
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't know how these ones become.
So that's interesting, right? The front doors face Brush Street. What is that, Smith down below? Or Custer? What's that?
Beaubien.
No, the South Street.
Oh, here?
Yeah.
That's isn't that Beaubien?
That runs north and south.
Does it?
Bethune?
Bethune. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
So, like, the south units face the interior, not Bethune. Do you see that? And I'm not sure if I think I have a problem with that.
Right. Yeah, I almost feel like those units.
Can you zoom in on that a little bit more? I think those front doors need to be on Bethune.
On Bethune. And then leave some sort of walkway. Well, this is, because this would be second floor.
Are those second floor units? Is that all community space? Can I go to the ground floor? That's the other thing, of course. These are all raised up, and I keep forgetting that.
Yep.
So that's the ground floor.
Yep, which is...
And that unit fits nicely facing Brush.
Yep.
Or Beaubien, whatever that street is. And I have no problem with the living room kitchen config there. Okay, I'm not uncomfortable with those bedrooms on Bethune because they're up 12 feet.
Right.
You know, they're up 10 feet, right?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, I'm down with that. Never mind.
So, yeah, I think I need to start working on. I have some areas where I want maybe to bump this out. That'll help my kitchen. Well, actually, that'll be the bed. If
The
I
living
do
room.
flip flop them, that'll be the living room.
Yeah.
And help turn some of my materials because I want.
Yeah, I mean that's the other thing that those little 1 foot, 2 foot bumpsies do. They allow you to dye one material into another. It allows for material changes. You don't have to do it everywhere. Just try to be like strategic about it. That's why, you know, doing windows in the corners, for example, although I typically don't do a lot of windows in corners, but just from a design perspective, doing them in the corner allows you to make, you know, dramatic material changes at corners, right, at edges. But you know, your building has a ton of corners, so it's going to be hard. It's going to be challenging to stay in control.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think my next steps, I'm going to start looking at developing my, let me get the first floor, developing these spaces.
Sure.
And what, you know, programming on what's going on. So I'll need some case studies for that.
Well, have you ever looked at, let's see, how about, let me see if there's any images of things that you could look at. Okay, so I'm going to screen share. So I want you to type in George Hargreaves, Hargreaves, and I'm gonna screen share now because I want to show you. Oh, unless you pull it up. So go to Images and go to third row, second picture.
That's fine.
Yeah, I'm looking at that too. Right, and then click on the second thumbnail.
Yep.
See where I'm taking you?
Mm-hmm.
Think of like ways that you can, or even the second thumbnail beneath. Yeah, it's a big outdoor kind of office-y complex there.
Yep.
But like, look how simple that one gesture is.
Mm-hmm.
A raised lawn area with a diagonal that returns back to the walkway, right? Just 3 different materials: sod, right, pavers in the traditional sort of European radiating pattern, right,
Mm-hmm.
and then that looks like concrete with benches on it.
Yep.
Little things like that can help you sort of think of ways to sort of create a new landscape in that sort of pocket space. So please don't think of, if you go back to your screen share, your drawings, please don't default to the swimming pool.
Right.
Don't think that the wildness of the landscaping and the designy stuff that you're going to do to fill that space up needs to happen inside of that pool. Think of ways that it can actually push up against the walls of the architecture, line up with doorways, right, in the way that you're seeing Hargreaves' stuff happen.
Yep.
So Hargreaves is one guy. Another one is Walter Hood. And look at his images. He's a landscape architect. And just click on images and then go to design up in the upper left. And if you look at, oh, let's see, maybe the third row first image, for example. Again, just thinking of look at that pathway and look at the raised planter beds, right? And the edges of the planter beds are different, right? So those are techniques. I'm scrolling through some of the other spaces he's done. If you go to the which one is that? If you go to now I can't find it. I'm in the go to that one. You just had it, the big large one.
This one?
Yeah, so go to gosh, I'm not seeing the same one. Go to the first image in the second row. No, I think we have different ones up right now.
Okay.
Let me screen share this with you just so you can see it. Sorry. Can you see that?
Yep.
So, I mean, again, this is just a raised lawn panel in an elliptical shape, just a stone wall, right, with colorful materials, and then really, no nonsense chipcrete or pea stone as a pathway with some sculptural elements, right, in the middle. So there's simple ways, I think. Here's another lovely, this roof garden upstairs. So think of each of these as kind of like the walls in the roof garden. This was what I was talking about, letting the ground plane, right, influence the architecture, let it turn up.
Yep.
If he had done a pocket park, I'd be hasty to sort of point that out. Well, this is maybe one. Again, just a whole bunch of like little moves to make spaces a little bit more intimate and to make them a little bit more enjoyable. Places that you actually want to be in, not just look at from above.
Right.
And I think that's kind of the challenge. I'm not seeing, but you can look at his website and maybe find something more. Also, so Walter Hood, George Hargraves, and then the other one is Michael Van Valkenburg. I don't know if I'm still screen sharing. I guess I am.
Yeah.
So this is we'll look at Courtyard. This is a landscape architect whose work is really, really beautiful. It's some of my favorite stuff. Let's see if I can find a good one. Oh, I love this. These are like the trunks of trees.
Mm-hmm.
It's another option. Thinking of the planting areas as like a much larger pattern, and
Right.
and see how it's picking up on the facade of the architecture, right? So this is obviously like an urban park, not
Yep.
quite the same thing that you're dealing with. Doesn't have the sort of intimacy that you've got. This sort of lowbrow approach. Anyways, so those are really important landscape architects that sort of look at this stuff. And
Okay.
have you been to New York to see the High Line? Have you seen that?
No, I haven't.
So the High Line is, and I'm sure you know about it, right? It's the raised railroad line. You can see the railroad tracks running right through it, but see how the pavers are solid, and then they start to like pull apart to let the landscaping come through, and then they pull apart again to let benches come through, always kind of endorsing the linear texture of the It's really an extraordinary place. I hope you have a chance to see it. I also love how the benches come up out of, talking about like dog food cans, like The benches
Right.
come up out of the ground plane. So it's got all of that stuff going for it. Or these sort of stack things, like we're just real simple stacks of timber, right?
Yep.
Like you could create like an amphitheater to look at activities in the park. And don't forget about how that ground plane can activate Brush Street or Beaubien, whatever that north-south street. Let some of the language of what you're attempting to do in that swimming pool actually violate the boundaries of the swimming pool. Let it come across the street, even if it's just graphical, or even if it's just change of material. You're trying to provoke a conversation about what could be.
Yeah, and I'll need to look at Bennett Park, but it'd be nice to kind of carry it even into Bennett Park.
Well, maybe Bennett Park needs a little improvement too, just because it's there and it's just what we would expect a Bennett Park to look like doesn't mean that that's the way it needs to stay, right? It can evolve too, and I think that's maybe. I mean, that would be lovely if you spent a week just like in charrette mode, right?
Yep.
Nathan, thinking about what Bennett Park could be if it was, that would make your whole project just amazing if you thought of a whole new program for Bennett Park.
Yep.
Maybe even creating some sort of retail facility that would put eyes on the park, 16 hours, 12 hours a day.
Right.
Like a coffee shop, not just in your development, but in the park itself.
In the park.
Another one of your little mini pavilions, like that commercial space. What if the footprint of the commercial space extended out eastward to the park, and you created like two sisters, like facing each other, like we just showed you tonight, so that the language of both was comparable, the fenestration was comparable, and one was the cafe in the park. And it activated the ground plane around it, and yet it was communicating. It was corresponding with your development. That could be very, very interesting.
No, yeah, I think that's a great idea.
That's what they pay me the big bucks for. Let's go back to your drawings for a second. You said something about the roof on the townhomes being.
Yeah, I ripped them off.
You ripped them off because
I'm rethinking what they need to be.
Well, the plate height for all of the walls in those cubes is consistent. Let's just say it this way. Let's revisit that.
Yeah.
Remember how we just talked about the living rooms and the kitchens and extending the kitchen wall plate height to be 4 feet taller than the ceiling, for example, to give privilege to light within those spaces, but also because the elevation needed it, right? It just needed that relief. So, you've seen lots of examples from me this semester. I think I've showed you some residential stuff. No, that was one I just looked at. Bear with me here. But like this view that I'm just going to show you right now, you saw it tonight. It's a way of, it's got two different things happening there. One thing looks, the big brown thing, obviously this is 3 stories and 2 stories. I understand that.
Yeah.
But this is reading like one building with another building up against it. So the idea of cladding the building into 2 different units is one option that you might want to think about. Let's go back to the units themselves again. I don't know that you have the sort of length and the width to do what I'm explaining here, but let's zoom in on one of those. I mean, these could all also be just clad in all one material, which could be very interesting.
Yeah, once I get up to the second floor, I have a little bit more variation in the form,
Right.
which I was thinking,
Well, maybe the bedrooms pop.
what's that?
Maybe the bedrooms pop up above everything else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because this mass would start to read a little bit taller. So this cube here. No, yeah, I think it would help to kind of elevate some of this, and then have different planes rather than one roof plane. Have maybe multiple.
I don't think it's one roof. I don't think it's one roof plane.
Right. No, it would
But
be. It would
it's but it's probably not any gables either.
No,
I think that's something you have to try to restrain yourself from doing what you think, like what you think it needs to be. You have to kind of push yourself on this vocabulary. I don't know if you're comfortable working in what I might call a modern vocabulary. Does your office do this kind of work?
Not residential. We usually have a design firm that we bring in to consult with. And they do the elevations and the units. We just do the CDs for them. So.
Yeah, sure. No, I understand.
Yep. Yeah, because initially I was thinking, well, this feels like it could have a gable, but I don't think it'll work.
Well, it could be that, those two units are also one roof.
Mm-hmm.
And then it might be a flat roof. It might be a hip roof. And that might be worth thinking about. I mean, I think you need to do a couple of studies. It might be useful to just sort of lay tracing paper over them and come up with some options. And you can let me look at them, and I'll let you know which one I think works for you. But like a low hip roof,
mm-hmm.
Like from something out of like the Caribbeans, if that makes any sense, that might be worth looking at. Popping up the bedrooms and letting it be taller might be worth looking at. Dramatic flat roof differences, or like just modest ones, might be the way to look at that.
Mm-hmm.
But I would study that in elevation.
Right. Yeah, I'm going to. I need to sit down and almost make it a diagrammatic study of all of these things and start to bring that into the presentation.
Right. I'm just seeing what my colleague in Cambridge did. So I'm going to screen share again. I'm going to show you something.
Okay.
No, it keeps going away. Okay. So this is a second scheme for a group of 2- and 3-story buildings linked together, right? The orange stuff is the garages in back. So this is the back, right? It's that the green bar or the orange bar where all these cars, see that? Those are garage doors. And then the units, are configured with these flat roofs, sort of all the same height.
Mm-hmm.
Floor plans. And then these are the elevations. And notice how in these elevations, right, that mortise, that key and keyhole idea is operating here. You see that?
Yep.
Here and here and here, sort of like what you've got, but how the facades are variations on comparable materials. Smooth white over textured gray over smooth white, dark smooth gray over light textured gray, and so on. And it's just alternating as it goes down the block. Your project, you sort of get rid of this one, but your project is this and this. Do you see that?
Yep.
And then these are the back. I'll zoom in a little bit more to. And then these are the blow ups.
Mm-hmm.
They got the little bridges like you got. Under the brick, it's kind of a soffit of wood. Windows are sometimes framed and projected out. Sometimes they're pushed in and with dramatic indents. Sometimes they're small, right, and narrow. And sometimes they're much larger.
Yeah.
So this is a really interesting, and these are all flat. So I'm not against the flat roof as a thing, but what I like about her work is that, like in yours, right, like this is one and this is another with you. So there's kind of like different roofs as well, but the differences are marked in this axis, right? In your case, the east-west axis. So there's kind of a formal language for the back and a formal language from the front. I think that was the last plate. Yeah. So that might be worth thinking about. It doesn't have to be an elaborate thing. Just stick with like a very concise thought process to make that play out.
Right.
What else?
I think that's it for now. I know at some point I'd like to look over some like graphics. They get sprinkled in every now and then, but just the best way of graphically presenting these,
What
efficiently.
software are you comfortable in?
Mostly Revit and Illustrator.
You can't really render in Revit.
No. So
You got to take it through Photoshop.
yeah.
How do you guys do renderings at work? Do you?
Mostly Photoshop.
But I
SketchUp.
mean, do you export like a Revit model, or do you export a SketchUp model? How do you guys?
Usually we start out in SketchUp, but I'm not a SketchUp person or fan. No. So
You're one of the only young people I know that doesn't do SketchUp.
I know my the president of our company loves it. He uses it all the time, and I just can't. I get in there and I mess everything up. So
No kidding.
but I have exported Revit as a AutoCAD 3D AutoCAD file, brought it into SketchUp, and then you can apply materials to it. So
Sure.
and then we just bought Lumion. So
Oh, you did?
yeah.
Well, try it.
Yeah, so I thought about trying it.
Oh, I'm glad you're using it. So I've had a number of students try it at this point in the semester and grind on it, and they ended up doing some very interesting work with it. So, see if it's apparently really simple to pick up. I have a pretty bright person in my office who I hired, and she picked it up in 2 days. She worked on it for like 16 hours. And watched some tutorials and got right into it. Now she's really like you, comfortable as hell in Revit and can work in SketchUp, but her ability to sort of pick up Lumion really quickly was really impressive.
Yeah,
So
I'm excited.
I bet you, and you got time to do it, so I would try that.
Right.
Okay, well, I'll let you go. Did Thomas say he was coming back?
I don't know. I haven't seen anything. I don't know what time. I think we're finishing up pretty early, so
Yeah, well, no, I don't have anything here from him. Okay, well, I'll leave the class open and I'm going to go get an adult beverage.
okay.
All righty. Have a good night. So you're not coming on the field trip then, right?
No. I think
Okay.
it was it.
No worries. No worries. We'll take lots of pictures for you.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks,
Appreciate it,
Mark.
Nathan. Bye-bye.
Yep.
One more to go, but he's not there yet.
Oh,
Hey, Thomas, let me put my headphones in.
okay. Same here.
Okay, I'm here. How are you?
It's been one of those days.
Are you settled in?
Almost. I just got to get my mouse out, or
No problem.
it's hard to use this touchpad. But
Did you have a good weekend?
it wasn't too bad. You?
It was a nice one. I got to see my parents, which is not every day because they live in West Branch,
Okay.
but they moved to Florida
Oh,
for the winter, right? The snowbirds.
right.
So
Snowbirds.
right. So they came through last night and we had Thanksgiving dinner with them, which was lovely. But now they're en route to Florida, which will take 2 or 3 days for them to do that. So we won't see them again till May because I don't make my way down there, but even though I should, but that's just the deal. We stay in Michigan and embrace it, right?
Yeah, I know exactly where West Branch is at. I used to live. Now
Well,
we're
that's
north
why I
of that.
mentioned it. Yeah.
So that's
So
couple-
yeah, it's a pretty part of the world, and
Yeah.
I want to tell you, I'm really excited about you coming on this field trip. I think it will really, augment. I mean, I know you live in Chicago. I know you see great architecture, and there's, I mean, pound per pound, square mile per square mile, there's more better architecture there than there is here. But this campus is really off the hook, and if you don't mind the drive, I think it would be really it'd be really a help to you, not personally, but just it's a good thing for every student to go through. So I hope you can make it, and if you want to bring your kids along or your family, make it that kind of trip, because I'm only gonna lock you down for 3 hours in terms of the tour. They can go shopping, they can go do other
Right.
things if they like, but they're certainly welcome on the tour too.
I don't know if Lawrence is still doing it, but when they did a school-sponsored trip to Toronto, that was interesting.
Sure. Who ran that? Philip?
Oh, I don't even remember who did. That's when Gordon Bugby did his walk-run tour.
Wow. The late Gordon
That's-
Bugby.
Oh, he passed away?
Oh yeah. Yeah, he
I
did.
hadn't heard that.
Yeah. Well, that was
He
several
was-
years. That was several years ago.
He was fountain of knowledge.
Yeah, he was
to say the
good.
least.
He was not my history teacher. My history teacher was Robert Benson, and because Gordon taught in the night school program, and Robert he was an adjunct, and Robert, on the other hand, was a full-time professor and taught all of the history classes during the sort of day. And Robert, pardon me, Robert was the cat's meow. Robert was who everyone was either totally enamored of, like me, or terrified of, like me, because we had to go through his sequence, right? We had to go through all of his history classes back when we had,
What was
trimesters, right? So
Oh,
we saw him in the fall, in the winter, and in the spring. But I ended up taking Robert for a long time. But I actually, as a result of that, never ever had Gordon for a lecture. So I have no idea what he was like. I don't even think I've ever heard him speak, to be honest.
You could tell he knew most of what he was speaking about. He actually visited. Most of his lectures was nothing but his own slides.
Yeah, I imagine so.
I mean, that was just unreal, and he had a quirky sense of humor.
Yeah. So say if you're driving, could you email me your phone number, your cell number?
I think I did already,
Did you?
didn't I?
Let me look. So I have Nate, I have Mariah, I have Mateo. I just need yours.
Okay, what happened to mine? Okay, I'll put it on the back end of this one with everybody else's. I think that's
Yeah, that'll be great. Just in case you get turned around or something happens, okay?
well, that never happens, does it?
You're a bus driver. What are you talking about?
With how these last few weeks have gone, anything will happen.
Right.
And it is still a Michigan number, so
Oh, good.
okay, you should be getting it then.
Okay.
It's part of the big long list that we were
Sure.
going through.
I got it. 989?
Yep.
Okay. I'm going to add those to my phone book, and we'll go from there. So what would you like to talk about?
I've had some masses figured out, but looking through other things, and I'm not really sorry, I'm a little scatterbrained right now, but
okay.
I guess I have 2 units I could show you, just to make sure I'm going on the right direction. Is this the right? I'm just pulling it up. Yes, yes. It was part of an. I pulled Revit files into one overall plan, so I didn't have to try to deal with it all one big huge file.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, screen share, then
Mm-hmm.
this is something like I'm going in, trying to think of color changes in color, not
Mhm.
necessarily these colors, but
Mhm.
different massing, different textures, ins and outs. I didn't do too much with the windows like I was showing before. I don't know if I'll do that with this or some other ones, but I'm not. I guess with refinement, is this a general direction to be going in, or?
Let me screen share something with you now.
Okay.
Can you cancel that?
I guess this is a little bit out of different than what I'm used to.
Can you
Yes.
see it? Okay, so these are like townhomes with gaps between them,
Right.
right? You can walk up and then walk up a stairway to get to a second floor unit right here, right?
Okay. Right.
And then you can go into the unit on the ground floor, sort of not unlike yours, or you can walk straight through and go into this ground floor unit.
Right.
Right. And so when you do go upstairs, then you can go into these two units, which are opposite each other. And in one case, you can take a stair down, and then the other, you can walk across a bridge.
Similar to what I've been doing.
Exactly. So I want you to look at this. So these are kind of like stitched units, where the bottom of one mortise and tendons into another. Do you see that? See how this brick is coming up into that window?
Yes.
Right.
The same way with the next one. It's the white's coming up into the window space.
And then do you notice how like the smooth white is over the gray brick, and then it's reciprocal. It's gray brick over the smooth white.
Completely different textures.
Yeah, but the same materials, the same two materials, but there's actually 4 logical expressions of them. I'm not saying to do this, but I am saying that just looking at 2 different materials plus the windows, right? And organizing them into a compositional way, the stitch, is one interesting way that this architecture firm, approached that. And then the backs of the units, because they have the garages, are kind of the same way. It is very interesting. Then they have some moments like here and here where there's a little notch for, like wood to show through, right? Or here.
Something to give a different feel to it.
Yeah, and then here, I'm going to zoom out a little bit. So here's that mortise. Here's that key slot, right, that we were talking about.
Yeah, I came across a bill. I don't remember what the name of it was. One of the Japanese buildings, they did something like this. They had, I think it was black exterior, but then on the one side they opened it up with a nice warm wood.
Cool. So
I've got it somewhere.
maybe think of these units in. I'm going to close this now because I think that was it, right? Oh, then there's the roof plan, the aerial view, right?
Right.
So I'll close this. So maybe don't think of, if you can go back to yours, don't think of these things as buildings. Think of these things as compositional units. Think of these things as volumes that are interlocked. Think of the programs as interlocked.
One of the things was when I was going through this was trying to relate them to its neighbor a little bit, not mimic what they have, but use elements from
Sure.
one to another. But
I also think that, based on tonight's lecture and just what I just showed you,
right.
think about the windows as design opportunities. I'll say this, the windows you have here are pretty familiar, and they are what I would expect to see, and honestly, they are where I would expect to see them, right? So in
Okay.
some ways, that means they lean towards the convention or the conventional. What I'd like to see you do is say, okay, I'm going to use this window, and this is the ideal proportion, and I'm going to find a number of ways to approach it. One, to use it as a single window unit. Two, to maul it with 2 or 3 windows to make a window a much larger window. 3, right? Think of it in terms of being pushed in or projected out so that it interrupts or disturbs the skin surface, right? That's just one way to approach 3 ways to approach one window. Then with the material, I love how you thought about like one is going to be like, I don't know if that's shake or not. That's pretty cool, right?
A change in material. You're talking about the one on the
On
left,
the left.
correct?
Yeah, so there's one that's got shake over like wood siding, and the other what looks like a stucco or a concrete render.
Some type of smoothish
Yeah.
material with a horizontal type siding. Try to do a little bit of put some difference in there, but
Yeah. And I'm so I mean my reaction though is that the materials are probably good, and I like what you're doing on them. I would just try to continue to study the windows.
okay.
Also, for my money, without sort of being able to explain clearly what I'm saying, but there's something about the slope roof that makes it look, again, more conventional and less like architecture, and something more about the flat roof, and it looks like architecture. And I don't know if that makes sense, but it's what I feel. Now, what do I mean by that? So I'm going to show you again Allison Brooks. Did you look at her work before? Did I show you her work?
No, I might have seen bits of it with somebody else, but
I keep getting, every time I type in a woman's name here, I get some supermodel. Good God.
technology. Sometimes you have to.
Yeah, it really is sort of frustrating. Okay, so I'm ready to screen share the Allison Brooks I'm talking about. Can you see that?
Yes.
So this is your project. This is exactly what I just said. And here's the thing, it doesn't have flat roofs. So it's really your project. It's got A, slopey roofs, B, warm brick walls, and C, wood siding. Oh, and 4, it's got the shakes. Do you see that?
Right. And you have the play between dark gray to a nice warm material too.
And notice how instead of, notice how the facade has a varied plate height along the front facade. Notice how the window is not where I'd expect it to be. I'd expect it to be right in the middle, right? Or I'd expect one to be here, right? And one to be here. But she moves it asymmetrically, and she bundles them together, and she makes them super large.
I don't even think it's a window. It almost looks like it's a slider.
It could be like a
Because of the-
French door, right?
Right, because it has that railing right in front of it.
Yeah, it has like a Romeo and Juliet balcony. And notice how the roof, like in your work, right? The eave, the rake is flush with the wall, like in your proposition. And there's no gutter, it's just a fold. It's just a
Right.
change of material there. Here's another example of them. So here's the side view of it. Do you see that?
Almost like she took one big building, she quartered it,
Sculpted it.
and then split it apart.
Yep, she sculpted it.
Yeah. And then let it look relate to the or the contours itself with that.
Exactly. You're
I
exactly
wonder if
right.
that's where she got it. That pitch was from the ground itself.
So when I look at this, right, I see, and again, I don't know how to say this. I don't know what I'm talking about, but I'm being honest. I see this as a modern interpretation of the residential tradition. I don't see this as conventional, but it's operating within the rules of the convention. I don't see this as building because I see it pushing the vocabulary of architecture more towards, it's moving that needle toward architecture. This is architecture. But it's using the same things you've got. Allison Brooks, this is a project you need to look at.
Okay.
I'll type it in down here in the chat box.
Okay.
I don't know if there's other examples. Oh, well, here's one. Here's another one. Oh, I love this. Look at this.
Wood.
So this is called the Herringbone Houses. It's your project again. And it's what we were just saying. Now, these are the flat roof versions, right? And she did the flush window, but she mulled two of them together, right? So that was option 2 in my window narrative. Then she did a big ass window, and instead of pushing it in, she extruded it out and framed it, right? You see the frame?
Yep.
See the big shadow right here and here? And then she looked at the skin as a wood condition, a wood skin, right? And she just treated it as like simple wood siding in a herringbone sort of notion. That's beautiful. I think the big window here, Thomas, if you look at this image, is set back. So the window frame, the face of the window frame, right, is flush with this 2-story mass. Do you see that?
And the window itself is flush with the wall itself.
Yes, with the wall that's stepped back. But then look, the wood herringbone is a 2-story thing over a dark stucco concrete thing, right? Real simple massing. And so I'd like to see you think really hard about how you can make your work kind of in this rigor, in this kind of dimension. Here's another view of that. This is your stuff.
And she carries that herringbone throughout the whole thing.
She does.
Railings, everything.
Yeah, she really, hey, yeah, hello. She really does.
But it's not tight. Not tight together. You can see through it, and
yeah, which I really love
Like a
here.
glow
Isn't
from
that lovely?
yeah.
She
What will
studied
happen
at
if you-
Waterloo, just up the road in Canada. But then she she practices in London. So here's another example. Let me look at this real quick. So this is
like
that same one close up, but this is a
Let's say it's
different project. So this one, again, sits on a base, and then the roof just rolls back. So the wall and the roof are the same material. See that? So that's another option.
And then she puts dormers on the higher
She
ones.
does. And then I'm looking at this model. Oh, this is a different architect, so I don't want to show that one.
What's the one far right above the group picture? Or far left, I'm sorry.
This one?
Yeah.
More Allison Brooks, 4-story stuff. Here the architecture is a simple trapezoid in section. You see that?
Yep.
And then it has these dormers that come out that are 2-story dormers, and then they are offset from 2-story entrances. This is a lovely project too. I actually like that cross section a lot for you. The sort of, it runs up 3. I don't know if yours is 3 stories or 2, but in this case, it's a 4-story chassis. She runs it up 1, 2, 3 stories, and then she pulls it back to a flat roof condition, and then it's symmetrical, right? See how the windows are not symmetrical on a symmetrical facade?
They're where the
Right.
building wants them to be, not where you would expect them to be.
Exactly. I really want you to try and look at your own architecture, Thomas, by testing this strategy. And when we go to Cincinnati, I'm gonna cause you to look at more things that really do push this sort of essence. It's a small push. It's a different way of looking at things, but it's not that different. So I'm not going to throw you in the deep end, but I really want you to start seeing that architecture emerges from this deeper appreciation of the tradition, of the convention, right? That's why I wanted you to look at Turner Brooks. Do you remember him, the weirdo from Vermont or New Hampshire or whatever?
He actually related, after I started looking at it, he's relating a lot of it to the contours of the ground, of the land around it.
And yes, he does, exactly, which I really love, because that's why his work is so, it feels so like of that community, of that place. But also his architecture is inspired by like the Left Behind architecture, right? Agrarian buildings, farm buildings, and you know, purely functional things that happen there. So take a look at Miss Brooks's portfolio and see if there's examples in here that you can literally say, okay, I like this chassis. I'm going to try this Bath Riverside chassis on my building and see how that works out. And it just testing that vocabulary will help you find the vocabulary that you're comfortable with, that you're happy to work with. I think there might be just one more in here.
Those dormers on that Bath Riverside, they didn't go straight back into the roof. She flared them out too.
She did. Yeah. You see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, they kind
So
of
it's not
like, they're like, that means that room is even bigger, which is another, it's just like, oh, I would have never thought of that, right? And that's,
it's not equal on each side. She did
not
a different angle for each one.
Exactly. So there's like, it's rigorous and pure, and then there's these bends and breaks in the rules that really, like, it's not irreverent rule breaking, it's not dishonest rule breaking, it's creative assertion.
Well, then again, what is rule breaking?
Yeah, well,
or
that's
what
just it.
what are the rules
Yeah,
actually?
exactly. So that's, as you get into this and start thinking about those questions as you're drawing, that's where architecture starts to come out. Cool.
Cool.
When are you leaving on Friday next week?
I
This
don't.
week.
I actually don't have a trip, so I can I'm thinking about 5 o'clock ish.
Okay.
So I need to figure out about where I'm going to be at if I'm going to find a hotel up and through there
Well,
or someplace to stay.
yeah, closer to the campus, the better.
Right.
And I'm probably going to leave the same time, so I'm going to be there like between 9:30 and 10:30. So if you
And
get
my
there,
problem-
if you get settled in and you want to get a beer, let me know. Okay.
Bad thing with me is I'm losing an hour.
I
It's
know.
a 6 hour drive, but now it's going to be more like a 7. So
yeah,
that
it's a
puts
long
me
day
there.
for you, so I may not catch you that night.
I mean, if I leave at 5, I know I'm going to hit traffic, so I'm going to have to go around it. That's
Yeah.
going to be putting me down there about midnight. So
Yeah, I can appreciate that. We'll certainly drive very safely, but I'm looking forward to meeting you, and I'm really looking forward to having you see all of this architecture there. What else did you want to go over tonight?
Well, I don't have. Seeing some of the other projects that I was able to see, I gave me some ideas for revising my plates so that way they look a little bit better and
Good.
condensing them down. So
Good. You know, I think actually Nathaniel's been doing a good job of that lately. So I definitely, you know, he uses all the real estate of that square plate.
I caught
light
part of his
colors, a lot of
presentation.
text. Yeah, he's very good at that. So good. Okay, well, I'll let you go. Start thinking about the next steps, and I'll look forward to seeing you on Saturday morning, Thomas.
Okay.
All right. Have a great night.
You too.
Okay. Bye-bye.